Hello. Hello. I had the immediate need to cough.
Take two.
Immediately. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another non-compete stream. This is very short notice, last minute debate, recap, processing sort of stream with none other than Brenton Lengel, who is my debate partner tonight. Brenton, thank you for joining us on such short notice.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been really wanting to talk to you like on stream for a while because I've been a big fan of your channel, and people in my own anarchist community keep joking that we're the same person because we're both like white guys in our 30s with brown hair that talk about anarchism.
With the beards too.
Yeah, with the beards. So yeah, it's really exciting to be here.
Yeah, well, and of course we have our non-white dude without a beard, Luna, joining us. And Luna actually watched the debate live, and I don't know about you, Brenton. I didn't really watch the chat because it just makes my blood boil. So I did not look at the chat. I glanced at it a couple times, and it was enough to know that I had made the right decision not to look at the chat. But Luna subjected herself to the chat the whole time, so maybe you could have a little bit of a perspective of a spectator.
The first thing I can be sure is that, like, the number of ANCAPs were too many compared to number of leftists in the chat, and they're so freaking like nauseous huge in the chat. I cannot even bear it. They're so. The leftists are so nice. All the comments from the leftists, like, try to like get the facts, the history, and the number.
Yeah.
And the ANCAP just like said like racist stupid thing, and then
I just turned the audio up, by the way, folks, so if you can hear us better now, let us know.
Yep,
I can hear a lot better. So
okay, sorry about that. I had a software issue.
And they even like together complain about you two, how you two interrupt those two doctors. But like the fact is, them also interrupted you two a lot.
Yeah.
And then like, but the chat just got flooded with those ANCAPs. Stupid comments.
There were a lot
of was boiling the whole time.
I don't know. Also, by the way, just so you know, those may not have all been ANCAPs. I know the modern day debate has had issues with both. They're because they started out as a religious debate channel. Their primary audience was like skeptics, Christians, and so it's really skewing right, and then flat earthers. And then, just to make matters worse, they've had some alt-right debates, including I debated famous neo-Nazi J.F. Garibay and crushed him on there. Wow. And that dude.
I don't think I could have done that, but okay.
It was one of the times I've been more brutal in a debate than I like to be, just because, of who I'm talking to. But like, so then the alt-right, like, they're like, oh, this can be a platform for us. And they try to come in. And I was really happy that none of the super chats were hate speech, because the debate the previous night with Vadim on 9/11 was a complete nutso. Like Vadim from Creationist Cat, they were sneaking hate speech into like the super chats. So we were thankfully at least spared that.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some rough stuff. I saw some racial comments about Luna, for instance, when I mentioned that, I was in Vietnam and had a Vietnamese comrade or whatever. So I did see racism, but I wasn't watching the whole time.
They lack terribly knowledge of history.
Yeah. A lot of,
can you believe that one guy said that, the communists control Cambodia since 1993. Oh my gosh. I'm dying over here.
A lot of people are saying you're having issues with, just real technical note, if you're having issues with the stream, this is kind of a known issue that's been happening lately. I think there's a cable or something that is screwed up somewhere between Vietnam and the USA. So the best thing to do is you could try jumping from Twitch to YouTube or YouTube to Twitch. That helps sometimes. But really, if you just back up the stream about a couple of minutes, you won't be seeing it exactly as immediately, but that will fix with the buffering. There's literally nothing that we can do about that. It's a buffering issue, and I don't want to get into the technical details, but the only thing that you can really do to fix that, from what I understand, is to back it up a couple of minutes, and hopefully that'll smooth things out for you. So sorry about that. Anyway, so I guess, do you want to go ahead and start? I don't know where to begin with unpacking this debate, but maybe Brenton, because you set it all up, you could talk about how we came to be here and our opponents and sort of that kind of logic.
Yeah, I mean, the way this whole thing kind of came about is I have a friend who runs a very small channel where he does like some religious and political debates named Todd Lewis. And Todd had David Friedman on several times. When I started doing stuff with modern day debate, I think I'd done a debate with some ANCAPs previously, some smaller time ones. And Todd mentioned to me, he's like, I don't know why you didn't just get David Friedman. So I had reached out to you about the possibility of doing the debate. And originally I wanted it to be against maybe like Adam Kokesh and Jeffrey Tucker. But we were trying to lock them down, and it was tough to get a hold of Kokesh, and Jeffrey Tucker didn't respond. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll try David Friedman, and Todd gave me his contact information. He immediately agreed to do the debate. He was really gracious. I was really excited about it. And then for a while, we're trying to get Dave Smith, but then there were some issues with that. And so finally, I was like, well, maybe I'll bow out and let you debate David Friedman.
I'm glad that didn't happen.
And so he was just like, oh, my friend Michael Heumer wants to do this. And I'd never heard of Michael Heumer before. But as it turned out, when I started looking into him, I've been arguing with ANCAP since 2014 online. I got out of Occupy Wall Street, and suddenly I'm like, wait, there's anarcho-capitalists? What the hell? Yeah. And we, kind of have been at loggerheads for a while. And there were all of these arguments that I had absorbed via osmosis from arguing with those ANCAPs they were weaker versions of everything that I saw when I researched David Heumer. So I was like, oh my God, my entire life has been leading up to this. I'm about to fight the final boss of anarcho-capitalism.
Well, I thought it was interesting, and one of the reasons I agreed to do it was because Heumer and Dr. Friedman both have kind of different arguments than what you see again and again and again, usually in our YouTube comments from Garden Variety ANCAPs. And also Heumer in particular, I feel really has the same values that I had when I was a right-wing libertarian. And I respect about Heumer, at least I didn't watch anything super recent from him, so I don't know how he's reacting to this. Maybe I don't know. But to the whole recent police brutality protests and stuff. But at least in the 2013, 2014, 15 era, a lot of the videos I was watching, he was very staunchly anti-police, which I think, a right-wing libertarian anarcho-capitalist, would not want to lick the boots of state police, as I see a lot of right-wing libertarians doing today. So I felt like they were at least principled and stuck to their principles, in a way that a lot of current contemporary anarcho-capitalists, I would say, since I think Ron Paul had a lot of, I didn't get into it a lot in the debate, but I mentioned I think Ron Paul kind of screwed up a lot of those dynamics by bringing in a lot of people who are who come to anarcho-capitalism through other agendas, I guess. But anyway,
I think you're totally right. I think also there is the Barry Goldwater argument, where libertarianism and get the government out of my, my private business. A lot of that went back to arguments that were advanced to support segregation. As a business, when they lost the battle for political segregation, they wanted economic segregation. They wanted private segregation, and banning black people from swimming in the same pools as white people, and banning and keeping up segregated lunch counters. And so libertarian arguments started to be made, and this pulled in a bunch of chud. So I found, after arguing with these people for years and years, and being one of them for a little while, it's about 50-50. You've got some principled people who I think under other circumstances would be mutualists. And it was great that you brought up mutualism during the debate. And then you've got 50% of them are basically alt-right people that either either they haven't figured out that that's what they are, and they're not really reckoning with the I guess crypto fascist values that they have, or they're just literally in there trying to get people JF Garape again. He claims to be a libertarian, and in our debate he was labeled libertarian as opposed to fascist, and he would make arguments well, to have liberty we have to keep the borders closed because I have to have I have to have freedom from all of these dangerous minorities to it's ridiculous.
See, and when I was an anarcho-capitalist libertarian, I called myself a right-wing libertarian, but when I was in those days, I was totally against the borders and I was totally against the police, although I was for the private police, which we talked about in the debate. And I mean, that was where I was really starting to
Private
feel
police.
my.
Private police can fix anything.
But anyway, so yeah, so I don't know as much about Dr. Friedman and Dr. Heumer. I've only watched a few of their lectures and that sort of thing. I do know that they're both, they're credentialed academics, which we are not, and which a lot of people in the comments mentioned early on that we wouldn't be able to handle ourselves. Although I think we definitely went toe to toe pretty well with them. We had facts, we had figures, we had data.
Yeah. I mean, that one guy kind of admitted we won.
I know. Yeah. Towards the end.
Yes. This is the pattern of the debate from NCAPs. I heard it so many times. Whenever you two ask them questions and they can't answer that, or they don't have enough knowledge to answer that, they will ask you back, how do you know that? How do you know that? And they try to correct.
And then we say our sources, and then they're, well, yeah, and it got a little annoying.
How do the sources know that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like...
And try to correct the way you use a word in your question.
The whole thing about the real income that was really annoying was that it was like, it didn't really matter what the exact number was. It could have been $20,000 or it could have been $50,000, but still the point remains that people are mired in poverty. But anyway, I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves. Do you want to jump in and start... Oh, go ahead.
Sure. Let's jump in and start watching it. But I wanted to jump in on that. The same thing happened with David Friedman when he was challenging me on my historical data. Like I lumped a lot of time together. So, and I love saying that Afghanistan destroyed the British East India Company because, it's just wonderful that that's where empires go to die. It destroyed the Soviets. It destroyed the British East India Company. Now it's destroying the United States. Can't control mountain folk. So, but his point there was purely pedantic because my point was, does that make a difference that the British East India Company still starved to death 10% of the Indian subcontinent in a single year? And that was just one famine.
Yeah. And it's like, it doesn't matter so much if it was $30,000. You're right. It was a bit pedantic, but I think that it was really because I wish that he had just gone with the actual ANCAP argument, which he did finally get to, which was that it's a choice. Yeah, poverty is a choice, but he tried to kind of stall.
About that.
He wanted to stall. I guess we should probably start watching.
Let's watch the debate.
Where do you want to start? I mean, do you want to skip the intros, or do you think that we need to watch some of that? I mean,
I think we can skip the intros and just go into.
Intro.
Yeah,
I skip it. It's kind of boring.
And I'm gonna play it at 1.5 speed unless somebody wants me to slow it down to go into a point. You know what I mean? Just so we can get through things quickly. So if that's okay with everybody. So here we go. I'm just gonna. I don't know how much we had. We had a total of 40 minutes of intros. Is that correct?
40 minutes of intro.
In theory. In
theory, because he was supposed to do 20 minutes, and each of us did 10.
Okay. So let's say, let's get to 41. Oh, plus there was the time. How much time was there before we actually started? There was about, not that long, 2 minutes. So let's just go to about 45 minutes and see where we're at. And we'll just run through and...
If anyone's hearing weird stuff in the background, that's my toddler son running around. And I think he's banging a drum.
There are circumstances in which we might be able to, but that's going to depend a whole lot on the culture of the society, how powerful and aggressive our neighbors are. Okay, the second edition you can read for free. It's
plug the book.
Either in my book, Future Imperfect. Which
I wouldn't respect an ANCAP if they didn't plug their book.
Yeah, hey, I plugged my comic. By the way, Snow White Zombie Apocalypse. Nominated for 2 Ringo Awards.
Oh my God! If and when I get back to the USA, I'll have to pick up a copy of that from you.
Absolutely, and if you like, I can send you the digital files on it too, if you want to read it. It's
I'd love to.
Yeah, there's a lot of revolutionary and feminist themes in it. So
I know I've addressed this several times. Megaritz, if the stream is stuttering, back it up a couple of minutes, or try jumping to Twitch. That's working better for some people. There's a buffering or a cable issue or something, but you might try backing up the stream a couple of minutes to let it buffer. Chat, can you mutual aid new people who are having problems and let them know?
Yes, please.
To try these things, so I don't have to keep saying it again. No offense to you, Megaritz. I don't blame you. I'm just saying I keep having to address it, so maybe we can anarchistically solve that problem and help each other. Okay, so where are we?
Of the culture, what?
Very first police department in American history, which was the Boston Police. That is how they were founded.
Okay, we're back. We're into the debate.
So now we'll go into our hour segment of open discussion.
Right.
Awesome. Dr. Friedman, thank you so much for that. It was a lot of what you said was really, really compelling. I have a couple of quick answers, and the one that I want to go into first is actually policing and private police. Because the thing is that this system that you were proposing has actually already happened in American history. I
love that I got him on this.
Was correct in that the first police departments in the South grew out of slave catching organizations. But in the North, the first police departments.
Did they ever respond to that? By the way,
No.
Did they ever respond to that?
I don't remember.
I mean, he kind of said basically, like, he did respond in that he addressed it. He said that he didn't know if my history was correct because he hasn't studied that period. Which, I mean, to be fair, you can't study all history, but yeah, this is pretty heavily documented. I found out about it, interestingly enough, from Robert Evans, who used to be on Cracked and has actually like gone and covered. He was like embedded with the PKK YPG and also covered the Ukrainian Revolution. And he does a wonderful podcast called Behind the Bastards, where he like did like a 6-parter where he went into like the history of policing in America with all the sources and everything. So when I heard about that, I was like, oh shit, that thing ANCAPs think like the thing that they think they want already happened, and the people that the ANCAPs would be today decided they didn't like it and moved it to the state.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, like that I think is like such a crucial point, and I never heard them address it. The fact that the violence of the police state did not start with the state.
Yeah.
It emerged from private individuals, and also powerful individuals dominating other people through coercive force predates the state and predates capitalism. So to say that, like, if you get rid of the state, then nobody's going to be coercive and nobody's going to dominate other people and nobody's going to accumulate enough power to have that kind of, it makes absolutely zero sense to me. And I never really felt like they addressed it.
When you get rid of the state capitalist and the capitalism, all will turn good.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah. So, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean
contractors.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, what I wanted to say is this is something that I noticed that all ANCAPs do, and I was hoping David Friedman wouldn't do it, but he did it too. And it's they do this thing where they imagine that. Okay, so like how when in America, like people said like, oh, keep the government's cotton picking hands off my Medicare. They file stuff that the state does that they don't realize the state does into just like the way things are, and then they imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah, when they imagine getting rid of the state, they only imagine the things that they directly observe about the state going away and the state of affairs that the state creates remaining. So, like, for instance, they're like, oh, well, there wouldn't be a lot of wars because look at how much peace we're enjoying right now. Well, we're enjoying that era of peace because of the freaking nuclear bomb. And, like, if we go into all-out war, we'll kill everyone and everything on the planet. So
it reminds me of an old Fremen expression, which is that, or an adage, which is it's the story of somebody who lived next to a big tall fence, and there was one slat of the fence, one board missing, and he would stand there all day and he would watch through this board, and a donkey would walk by every day. And after several weeks of watching through this board, he suddenly stood up and he shouted, I understand. The nose causes the tail.
Oh,
and so the idea is, and this happens, like, for instance, a lot with capitalists and with race realists who say that, like, black people have destroyed families. The family system for black communities is destroyed, and that's what causes their poverty. Whereas both the destroyed families and the poverty were caused by the brutal system of capitalism and slavery and all these sorts of things. But what they'll do is they will put people into a system of privation, and then they will blame one of those symptoms of privation on causing the other symptom of privation. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of gets to what you're talking about here.
They're essentially what happens. They essentially, gaslight people. They put people into a terrible situation and then tell them it's their fault. So
absolutely. You want to keep watching?
Yeah, I figure.
Okay, sorry.
And this was an incredibly corrupt and incredibly, it was an incredibly corrupt system. And it was also like an incredibly expensive system. So expensive that the businessmen all got together and said, we're paying too much for protection to these private contractors. And these guys are going out, and what they're doing is they're making deals with thieves. And the thief will steal the property. The immediately will be recovered by the officer, and the officer will return it for a reward. So what they said to themselves was, okay, so this police system is not working. We're paying too much money, and these people are corrupt. What we need to do is we need to make it cheaper for ourselves. Let's make it into a public public utility. And all of the business owners, or the vast majority of them, got behind this. And you had the very first police department in American history, which was the Boston Police. That is how they were founded, with a push from the very people who are calling for anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism today, which is essentially the petite bourgeoisie business owners. So,
and I would say that having an understanding of the foundation of the police in the USA is one of the most basic. That's like one of the first things you should start studying if you're any kind of libertarian and if you're opposed to the state, is having a deep, thorough understanding of policing in the United States of America, because I think the American police state is the most powerful, wealthy, most dominant police state in human history. And for somebody to not have at least a fairly familiar understanding of that history and then to call themselves an expert on the state and capitalism, it does me a concern.
It's very important because like police in Vietnam, we also have a police, okay? And like the police in Vietnam is way less brutal. And like, because the original police in Vietnam came from like the revolutionists who fought with Ho Chi Minh in 1945 and won our country over French colonialism and then Japanese fascism. So that, and like, that is why like it's not perfect in Vietnam, but it's way better. And I already made a video about this if you want to watch. But like, generally speaking, the police in Vietnam is way less brutal and way more reasonable.
Oh yeah, you know, I'm actually really happy that I ran into you two, because for years, like when I decided to be an anarchist, starting like around 2010, I think was when I first threw up my hands in the air. I was like, fuck it, property is theft, and then Occupy Wall Street happened. Whenever I argued, I would actually point out like the successes of Vietnam. And I'd be like, I'm not even arguing for like MLs, but like, honestly, Vietnam very much is a success story. And I think a lot of it goes down to like Vietnamese culture and how that interacted with Marxism.
Yes,
exactly.
And I do think that like, how can I say it? Like, all of the successes of Vietnam, I think, are attributed to collectivism and the willingness for Vietnamese people to value each other's lives, you know, and to value the lives of people in other nations as well. Because like Luna's father, for instance, went to Laos for 10 years to for a what did you call it?
Non-obligation aid.
A non-obligation aid program where Vietnam was building and constructing infrastructure in Laos for nothing, for free.
Yes, for nothing. So here's the thing: in the 1970s, something like that, my dad went to USSR for 3 years and learned for free to be the heavy truck driving, something like that. And then Vietnam at that time, we were so poor, and we were still recovering from the war. It's so fucking poor, and we just received the free aid from the USSR, and we immediately sent free aid to Laos to help. It's so like the solidarity between countries. Yeah, that's it. And my dad was
and they're doing it now with COVID. They're sending free material all over the world for that. So I think that mutual aid spirit is alive in Vietnam.
And Cuba also sent free doctors to Vietnam to help us too.
Yeah. I'm going to start playing the video again because I really want to see Dr. Friedman's response, because I can't exactly remember what his response was, but I do think this is like this is a critical moment though. It's right at the beginning, and we're talking about the very fact that capitalism is what led to the police state as we know it. So I think Dr. Friedman's about to respond here.
I'm wondering how you will manage to get around that problem. And then there's a couple of other problems that I see, but I don't want to throw too much at you. I'm wondering what's the solution to that?
Begin with, I have no idea whether your historical account is true or not. It's not a period I've studied. It was like, I know a good deal about 18th and 19th century law enforcement in England because I've actually written on that subject. And that starts out with a system where criminal enforcement was private. That is to say, there were government courts, and it was the government that hanged somebody when he was convicted. But there were nothing.
I'm gonna back it up.
There were government courts, and it was the government that hanged somebody when he was convicted. But there was nothing equivalent to our police system. And the police there come in about 1830 in England, the peelers as they were called. But I would have to know what the rules and institutions were that your people were operating under, because were they, for example, themselves?
Does Dr. Friedman?
I'm sorry.
I'm not trying to be insulting here, but does Dr. Friedman seriously not know the basic history of policing and the contention between private police and workers in the 19th century?
You know, I think he definitely does not. Which, I
find it hard to believe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. He's trained as a physicist, and he's interested clearly in, he's interested in history, but he's focused on specific parts of history, like Icelandic history, for instance, which I was hoping he'd bring up Iceland more because I've been there 3 times and I know a shit ton about that country. It's one of my favorite places on earth. I'm wearing a Viking torque. I wear that in all of my videos. But like, no, I think he just doesn't know about this history. And the thing is that America makes it very easy to not know this. Like, you really have to go looking for it. And keep in mind, like, he's from an older generation when, like, the only way he could have even found out this stuff, it's not like he can just go and Google it. Like, he would have to have found the right books to read. So I'm willing, I'm willing to forgive him for not knowing this radical history because you know, I didn't know about like I didn't know about Buenaventura Durruti until like I was you know, ready to write a play about the Spanish anarchists.
Yeah. I think that though that like really if you really this is where again I am an anarchist, but I am also consider myself a dialectical materialist, and I think one of the most important things about dialectical materialism is having a comprehensive view of reality. These are the two rules, right? Luna's my professor of dialectical materialism. So the 2 rules of dialectical materialism are comprehensive view and a historical view. So you have to look at things with as many data points and as much perspective as you possibly can, including perspectives you don't agree with. You know, so get data from as many sources as possible, but also look at them historically and look at how things have changed and evolved over time. And if you really want to understand the capitalist police state, you have got to look at how it formed. And if you don't, then you will never understand it because like it's so critical to understand the way that police abuse works in the USA is to know that it has a direct heritage from slave catching, what they used to call Indian constables, and these private police forces that were used specifically to suppress foreigners who came into work and who developed collective bargaining and unionizing and that sort of thing. This is exactly specifically where policing comes from, and it's exactly why it's taken the form that it has today, and it's why it's such a brutally oppressive system. And they got all of this power not initially from the state, but from capitalists who paid them, gave 300 Pinkertons Winchester rifles to murder striking workers during the Homestead strikes. You have got to know this stuff. And if you don't, you really can't talk about it. And this is what we're kind of seeing right now with Dr. Friedman's response is like, I don't know. Maybe, who knows?
Yeah. I've never heard of that stuff. What?
And it robs the point from you because you made such a good point, Brenton. Like you made such a great point, an irrefutable point, really. But it robs you from getting that point because all he has to do to undermine it is say like, well, I don't know the history and whatever, and it's just like, and if you're not careful, the point ends up going to him because he could just undermine it by just saying like, oh, you can't trust history, But it's like, this is very, very, very well documented. There's no dispute over what happened with the Homestead strike or with the Pinkertons or with the slave catchers. This is very well established. So I guess I'm kind of striking the nail too hard here, but I think it's important to slow down here.
It is important to slow down. And, also, again, like, I don't know any reason why he might, go and specifically seek out the Battle of Blair Mountain, for instance, because, there's that bias confirmation bias where you specifically seek out information that only reinforces your worldview. And a lot of people wind up doing that. I would figure that he's probably just not familiar with the history of radical labor, and in much the same way that he's not familiar with the formation of the state. Like, which amazes me because a lot of ANCAPs aren't familiar with that, which is why more people need to read David Graeber's Debt: The First 5,000 Years to understand the formation of the state and the role that currency played both in the building up of the state. And the relationship that it has to taxation, slavery, and wars of conquest. And all of this is explained in Debt: The First 5,000 Years. And so it always drives me crazy when you see ANCAPs who are really fetishizing over this currency or that currency, when you realize that currency is literally what made the worst aspects of the state possible.
Right. I'm trying to adjust my audio because people are saying it's low, and I can't really understand why because it's looking good on the levels. But anyway, tell me if that fixed it a little bit. I boosted us a bit.
Maybe I'm just shouting. That could be it.
No, it's something. I don't know. Maybe StreamYard's having some problems today. But I think let's continue with Dr. Friedman's response.
Liable if somebody sued them for doing something wrong. I should say the business about stealing and then selling it back. I don't know if you've ever seen the Dry Groschen opera, the 3 penny opera, but the
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't seen it.
the central figure of that is based on a historical figure who combined the professions of thief-taker, recoverer of stolen.
Yeah, I didn't understand this part.
I don't understand.
Oh, he was just
on large scale.
he was kind of. I feel like he was kind of like ceding the point that what I was talking about had happened in history. Because yeah, Threepenny Opera I haven't seen. I should have. I was a theater major in college. I really should have seen it. But like, I think he was kind of ceding that. What I had said had struck a chord with him. It sounded right, even though he didn't really know like the nitty gritty of the history of that period.
So, okay. But his point basically is that there was this historical figure who was like running a thief operation and running a thief catching operation simultaneously.
I don't know if it's a historical figure. So Threepenny Opera is a play, I believe. And I can Google that. And so like, he basically was like, I saw this play with the behavior that you describe in it. So that was what he was bringing up. So it was kind of him conceding my point, actually, which made me happy.
It kind of went over my head because I was trying to.
Of thieves.
Yeah, I can see.
No reference for about 10 years.
Yeah, look at my blanket.
But then various people wrote books about it because he was an interesting.
I think I was actually Googling it at that point because I was like, what the hell?
But in the system that I'm describing,
here's important.
The police who are dealing with me are the ones of the firm that I've agreed to.
Okay, I just want to let that sink in. He's saying he wants to live in a society where he agrees which police he hires to police himself.
Yeah, which
is basically the idea.
Yeah, which also, by the way, that was what the freaking people who decided it wasn't a good system were doing. They were the ones who were doing the hiring.
Right.
Wait a minute. I have a genuine question.
Uh-huh.
So, like, if the corporation has a capitalist has his own private cops, and then somebody he claimed that somebody stole something, and then sent his police to.
It's warlordism. I mean, like it really is warlordism. It really is.
Oh,
yeah.
Like you're talking about people who have individuals who have private police forces or armies or coercively violent forces.
To
that
me,
they
it sounds
control.
exactly like what my grandparents had in the 50s. They were fucking super rich landlords, and then he has
A little
his
background.
own-
Luna's grandfather on one side was a very poor worker, and on the other side, her grandfather was literally a lord of the realm.
Yes.
Okay, so Luna's got both perspectives here, but so
That's
you're talking about your lordly grandfather.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then his family had a whole team of like guards that literally can just go grab the poor farmers that like they believe that they had stole or something or did some crime and then bring to the house, and then he just like freely punish those poor farmers.
That's what it is.
And nobody
It's a lordly arrangement where it's
nobody knows
that was the lord's job. It was like during feudalism, the knight's job was to be ready to be a fucking sorry, I haven't said a bad word all night. I would like to let everybody know I didn't say a single bad word through that whole debate, even though I really wanted to many times. But anyway, the landlord, I mean the lords were there to be tough guys, to be enforcers. That's what they were.
Punishment.
That's what feudalism was, and that I fail to understand, and they never really address this point. I fail to understand how getting rid of the state would stop capitalists from hiring private militaries and armies and police forces to do their bidding.
I think I think what they think about it is that like they think this would be a very polite way of doing it, and everything would be done through the free market. So, like for instance, the lords would be fair because if they weren't fair, people would stop giving them money.
They would shop elsewhere, right?
Yeah, they would shop elsewhere.
They would shop at the lord across the street. So this makes no sense. Okay.
So means that there would be no police brutality because nobody reported. Nobody knows.
Well, like they have. I wanted to bring this up in the debate. Like they have a idea that like if they can just make them Mick cops, like the cops will not be horrible and brutal because like I don't know, they're like they're used to getting their
PR.
Yeah, they're used to getting their way at like the Sizzler when they like send back a steak.
The customer's always right.
Yeah. So like they're like, oh well, if we just like have the same relationship with the cops that I have with the Sizzler, like everything will be great. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't the freaking Sizzler waiter does not have a gun and the ability to throw you in a cage.
Right.
And if he did, I guarantee you, your experience at the Sizzler would be very different.
Oh my God, I know a lot of waiters, and I'm sure that if they were armed, we would have a much more polite society in restaurants. But let's see if Dr. Friedman has any other.
I could hire a different firm.
If
the police who are working for me.
But it's like also, and this is a kind of a silly little gotcha. Okay, so whatever. But like, if I hire the police that enforce me, and then it's like if I murder somebody and they come to arrest me, I'll be like, well, you're fired. It's like, like what? It doesn't make sense.
Oh my God.
I just don't understand like in pragmatic terms how this arrangement works, where it's like, okay, it's like, or like, what if like you didn't pay your bill that month? Like that, because tell me, like, and that's a privileged position if you don't understand what it's like to have never been able to pay a bill, if you've never been late on a bill. But like, what? Because like I've had my water shut off. What if I had my fucking police turned off, or my firefighters? Which this did happen, by the way. If you want to talk again about history that people should know the history of, when firefighters were competing private entities, they would just let buildings burn down if they didn't pay their bill. And they would also show up and like have fist fights with each other about who gets to put out the fire, so who gets to collect the pay.
And also raid the house for valuables.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
I wish that you mentioned it, but I guess that you forgot about it. Like the ANCAPs, I believe in the power, the magic of the invisible hand will fix the economy and fix everything. It's so fucking stupid, and they think that the competition will like keep everything like good or something. That is so stupid.
Well,
it's a fact in Vietnam.
Let me say really quickly, one of the reasons I agreed to this debate is because I haven't seen. Maybe you're wrong, Brenton. Tell me if I'm wrong. But from what I watched, they don't really lean on that a lot. Dr. Brenton and Dr. Friedman both have different arguments for defending capitalism. I mean, am I wrong? Because I think I watched one. Sorry, Dr. Heumer. Dr. Heumer made one speech where he talked about that there are market failures. I think Dr. Friedman actually talked about that.
Dr. Friedman did. Yeah, they both have. So Dr. Friedman is unique in that he does a consequentialist approach to anarcho-capitalism. And I was really, because I've mostly argued with the von Mises people, and they are fucking insufferable. But like, he basically argues, instead of coming from like, okay, these are the universal rules for society that we all must follow to live an ethical thing. He doesn't, for instance, do the NAP. Now, I don't know if Dr. Heumer does the NAP. He tends to do this real. I understand why he does it. It's really annoying to me. Like I said afterwards, like he's basically like the daddy of 4 of my ulcers. He tries to sell people on anarcho-capitalism by like doing a common sense approach. So you might hear an ANCAP say something like, "Well, if you acted just like the government would put you in jail. Is that right?" And like when he does it as a professor of moral philosophy, it's a fairly good argument. It's not correct. Like there's a million problems with it, but but when then like I don't know, Larkin Rose listens to him say that and then tries to repeat it to everybody, and then the guy who's even dumber than Larkin Rose hears that and then repeats the thing that's been repeated from Heumer to Larkin Rose to him to me, and I'm just like. Like it's one of the most infuriating things, because they'll like be like, "Oh, do you like is not murdering people good?" And you're like, "Yes, not murdering people, it's perfectly fine." And then they'll be like, "Okay, then, so I guess I get to marry a 13-year-old child if they consent." And I'm like,
no, the leaps of logic. It's like, oh my God, I'm fortunate that I never got involved with those kinds of right-wing libertarians. And I was always, when I was a right-wing libertarian, I was always very much of the, like, I guess that was a source of a lot of cognitive dissonance, though, because it's somebody actually this dovetails a little bit. Somebody asked us I think an earnest question. Papi Chulo said, how would direct democracy work? Also, if these people could vote out representatives in a representative democracy after they win, would that be good? So I'll really quickly say just something you could look into is liquid democracy, which is kind of a hybrid between direct democracy and representative democracy that I'm kind of a big fan of, because I think it solves problems of both. Liquid democracy is basically this idea where for any given vote, you can either vote directly yourself, or you can choose any other representative to vote on your behalf. So for instance, if you were having some kind of complicated technocratic law being passed about like nuclear energy, for instance, you could choose to have a nuclear engineer vote for you if you trust that person, or you could vote directly if you don't trust anybody else to vote for you. And you could, and I think that might be something that would have been too complicated pre-internet and pre-technology that we have today. But I do think that nowadays we could design some kind of system where that might be workable. And so you could have like literally like a bunch of representatives, and you could say like, okay, my representative for making decisions about whatever, like factories would be factory workers.
I have an older brother who is the chief engineer of the power plant, so I would let him vote for me.
Yeah.
I know nothing about power plants.
Right. And so, and I think that, you could design the system. That's just, now this is like a very specific thing, and I'm not saying it would solve all of our problems or whatever. I just think it's an interesting concept that I think we could all just kind of like look into a little bit more. But going back to the direct, like if I had to choose between representative or direct democracy, I'll almost always choose direct democracy. It does, but again, I think that one of the most important jobs of anybody in society is to be thoughtful and active in how we design our systems of democracy, because like a poorly designed system can be worse than no system at all. So yeah, there's definitely shortcomings to any system of democracy or any system of representation, and we have to be conscious of those and try to design systems that work the best for whatever situation we're in. Brenton, I think you probably have some thoughts you want to share on this. So,
I definitely do. So if you want to know how it would work, I mean, I would really look up at how the GA at Occupy Wall Street functioned. We came up with, it was really interesting too. And a lot of people that had been their first time with like mass decision making, like were very down on the GA because they're like, all we do is sit there and argue about money. And like, I was like, well, I was in a fraternity and we used Robert's Rules of Order and all we did was sit there and argue about money. So I'm not sure that that's a difference, but usually with direct democracy, everybody gets together in a GA, a General Assembly, around a thing that is large enough that affects the entire community, and we decide beforehand if we're going to be doing a majority vote or if we're going to be doing a consensus vote. And with a consensus vote, essentially, people would signal if they agreed with the measure, and other people might do like a block. We used a lot of hand signals at Occupy Wall Street because we weren't allowed to have the police would arrest us if we had a microphone. So like, and the block simply means if this measure passes, I will leave the community. And so the other people say, do we want this person to remain in the community? Okay, maybe we alter the thing because it's been blocked, or is this so important that we don't care if you leave the community? So there's that. Then there's also like delegates and recallable delegates. I can see problems with delegates that are immediately recallable, but I think what's important is that politicians should not be a job. Like Mitch McConnell has been in Washington for so long. He doesn't live with the people of Kentucky. He doesn't deal with any of the issues. He's no longer a Kentuckian. He's no longer whatever he was before he was a politician. And once that happens, his new friends and new priorities become like, how do I make these other people in D.C. happy? How do I make these lobbyists that I deal with happy? And I think it's one of the big problems just of power. When I went even just from being like a regular poster on the internet to being a moderator in a forum as part of a team of moderators, my perspective and my alliances changed, and suddenly I was more concerned with the opinions of the other moderators than I was necessarily with the people that we were moderating. Now that was a pretty healthy situation, but like when you have cops live outside of communities, when you have politicians live outside of communities, you get them so disconnected from the reality of the people they're supposed to represent that they can no longer really be trusted to represent them, and they need to be recalled.
Yeah. And I've worked so like another thing I would say, and I think Luna probably has a lot of perspective about Vietnam's different systems of democracy, because I think it's very interesting. But real quickly, just to piggyback what you said, I have worked in a lot of flatly hierarchical organizations since becoming a leftist, for various forms of activism and organization and that sort of thing. I have worked in little workers' cooperatives. I have worked as a capitalist running a business. I have worked as an employee for giant corporations and small businesses. So I feel like I've gotten a pretty good smorgasbord of different organization structures. I will say the worst organizations to work in are flatly hierarchical systems that I would generally advocate for that have terrible or no like poorly designed systems or no systems whatsoever of organization. That is a shitty situation to be in when you have a lot of people and they all have equal power and there's no structure to keep us organized. It sucks. Okay. And I'll be the first to admit that. And I've been in a lot of these like kind of chaotic organizations, which are anarchistic, in name, but there's no structure for democracy. There's no structure for communication and organizing, and it sucks. And it quickly becomes toxic. And we have what I think Joe Friedman, who is a feminist, came up with this term, tyranny of structurelessness, where a few loudmouths will come in. It's like such a great term because it's so true. And anybody who's done anything with a group of people, without any structures in place, there will be a few loudmouths who come in, and just through virtue of like force of will and personality and that kind of thing, they throw their weight around and they get what they want, and it pisses everybody off, and the group falls apart. That's what happens every time. But the best organizations I've ever collaborated with are flatly hierarchical organizations that have well-designed systems. And so, for instance, I work in a lot of groups, and 2 or 3 groups that we use, where we use Lumio, which comes out of the Occupy Wall Street consensus form of democracy. And Lumio is basically an online platform that takes those hand signals. Because look, when I first saw I'm going to be perfect.
Yeah, the up
when
twinkle.
I first saw the footage of the Occupy Wall Street, the people doing the hand signals and stuff, I thought it was completely cringy. I'm not lying. I was just like, what the hell are these people doing? They look ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you know what? It works. It does work. And it works. And I learned that by doing this online system, which was based on that. And it does work.
Yeah, it's a really great system. Like, it looks really silly. Like, and the media did their best to make it even more silly.
They did.
Like Stephen Colbert and all that. But yeah, I still do like the up twinkle, down twinkle, and when I'm doing my debates.
Now that I'm used to it, like in the debate, I liked it because I got feedback from you non-verbally. You know what I mean? But when you first, it's like anything. When you first encounter something, you're going to have that like resistance phase where you're like, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Which I had for years here in Vietnam. Luna, do you want to talk a little bit about just the way that the democracy works here in Vietnam? And
you
have any
talking about
comments?
the company or the government?
I'm just asking if you wanted to comment. We've been talking a lot, so.
I just want to say, like, in every companies in Vietnam has to have union.
Oh yeah, of course.
If they don't have it, that's against the law, and the workers have the right to sue those companies, and they will definitely rule and have to pay the money.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, and it's actually effective too. There are a lot of strikes in Vietnam.
Literally every day in Vietnam, there would be a worker strike.
Oh, so I actually got the figure too low.
Yes,
when I was.
I heard that.
You should have came in and handed me a piece of paper. No, but yeah, there's a lot of strikes in Vietnam, and there are a lot of quote unquote illegal strikes actually.
80% of them are illegal.
Yeah, which means that like they don't go through the official. Because this is something where when I debated Destiny, he tried to use this against me. He said like, workers in Vietnam have to get permission from the government to strike, blah blah blah, which is like in this very technical way. Technically true, because technically every union has to be registered with the government,
exactly.
Which is true in the USA, by the way, because there's the Labor Relations Board, I believe it's called, something like that, has the exact same system in the USA, where they have to register your union with the government, and to go on strike, they have to like file with the government on paper. Now, in practice, like Luna just said, 80% of the unions strikes that happen in Vietnam are illegal because they're not registered with the government.
Exactly.
But how many of them get prosecuted for breaking that law? Zero companies have, zero unions have ever been.
The Vietnamese government very well aware of that, but they decided to not do anything. They decided to criticize those unions because they didn't do a good job on organizing the workers.
And so these are basically wildcat strikes, and they happen all the time. 80% of strikes happen in Vietnam. So you can do the math on that. But now the point of the matter is, now what I'm going to say to that is, this is something that this has absolutely kind of nothing to do with anything, but I think it'll come up again later for some other points down the road. So I'm going to plant the seed now. One of the things that I think is very anarchistic about Vietnam, and that I think is important to anarchism, and this is something where we have to be careful, like, and you have to have nuance with this take that I'm about to drop. But Vietnam is very focused on the spirit of the law,
exactly,
and not the letter of the law,
exactly.
And it's a very relationship-based kind of a system here, and so there are a lot of laws that on paper maybe look worse than they actually are, the way that and that's one of them that I've, because like when I first learned about the way unions work in Vietnam, on paper it looks like kind of this like kind of crappy system, but the way it works, shakes out in real life, in the way that they organize things here, it just works out differently. So that's just
that's fascinating.
Something to consider. Yeah.
Well, no, because it's the total opposite, like in the United States, where everything is the letter of the law, and it's all about like subverting the spirit. I like that's like 90% of a lawyer's job, at least in popular culture, is like figuring out like the ways around all this stuff. Yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's one of the things that I loved about like when I did, and I'm not very educated on Vietnam, but what I have read on Vietnam, I've always been really impressed with it. Like, I loved that Ho Chi Minh came to the Americans first before going to the USSR, and that he took a lot of good ideas that America had and applied it, and then we showed up and fucked shit up because
the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence is almost word for word taken from the American Declaration of Independence, and that's because Ho Chi Minh actually like went to New York at one point, and he liked things about America.
He wrote 8 letters to Truman, and none of them got into Truman's hand, and all of them are still in the CIA's documentary basement.
Right. He got totally snubbed.
Yeah, well, and it's. You can see why in like the Cold War era, people would keep those kinds of letters off of his desk, but it's like, even then, like, I feel like that's one of the major, I mean, this is hot take, the Vietnam War was bad. I know a lot of people are going to hold that against me, but like,
which, by the way, just because something Friedman says later on in the interview is that one of the reasons we'll never have war if under this anarcho-capitalist system is because war is so expensive. But the Vietnam War and most wars exist to profit capitalists.
Oh my gosh, the war is to profit, to make more fucking profit to capitalists. Like those fucking capitalists who made weapons. This is the way for them to launder the money. They took the people's tax and forced the government to buy those weapons to drop
on Vietnam.
And then those tax money from your pockets go to the pockets of those capitalists.
It's an indirect way of
oh my gosh,
of redistributing wealth from the working class to the capitalist class by bombing workers in another country. It's really disgusting.
Well, if you look into modern monetary theory, it's one of the reasons why we throw so much money into like the military-industrial complex. Like, when the government is in the red, the people are in the black. When it's domestic spending, you can essentially, if you have the political will to put out a program, you can put that out, and you won't even necessarily cause inflation just by printing money to do it, as long as it's spent within proportion of a growing economy. So, like, this essentially. There's a huge incentive to have a war. Now, I don't know if you eliminated the state structure, maybe they wouldn't be able to do that particular trick. But I have a feeling they'd figure out a way to do something similar.
Yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree with that. And I think that, I'd love to have a whole discussion with these guys about MML. I'm sorry, not MML, MMT. Yeah, MMT. Because I would love to hear what they think about that. Because like that's another one of the big myths of anarcho-capitalism. I mean, it all comes down to scarcity and the myth of scarcity.
The free market.
Which I tried to get into, but they didn't want to engage with that.
I forgot to. I wanted to bring up like manufactured scarcity. Because we've got a huge amount of that. Like iPhones are built to break, and refrigerator. Tons of our stuff are set to break just so.
Steam. I mean, the best example is software. There is no limit to the supply of a piece of software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a video game, like they could make literally an infinite number of copies of that as long as you have enough hard drive space to fill it.
Why Steam charges like twice more money in games in America?
Supply and demand. It's not. It's just because it's not supply and demand.
Because they can charge more over there.
What Luna's referencing is that in Vietnam, if you go into the Vietnam version of Steam, most games are about half price versus what they are in the USA. It's not because of supply and demand. It's because a capitalist enterprise is going to get whatever they can trick people into paying, essentially.
And nobody else is and no one's pirating on Vietnamese Steam.
Right. Well, the Vietnamese people pirate a lot, so they have indirect competition from the piracy. So, which hats off to all of my Vietnamese comrades flying the black flag. But okay, let's keep going with the view.
I behave in that way. I will find somebody else to do it. I think, by the way, the idea that the petty bourgeoisie are the supporters of capitalism.
I love your expression in some of this, dude. Look at that. Did you see that?
I didn't mean to wear my heart on my sleeve so much. I was trying to just look neutral.
They can
like kill me.
pretty well to raise money to.
God, I look a little bit like Destiny. I didn't mean to look that miserable.
The losers are most of the population.
Yeah, like Chomsky talking about in a developed society, the certain cartels essentially will seize the levers of power and make sure that the government subsidizes them. That's essentially
part of what's odd about it is realizing it's not a matter of certain people get benefited. You can easily enough have a case where the same person is getting $10 at a cost to other people of $20 because he's owns.
He's just describing a market here, is he not? Like, what is his? Can you explain his contention here? This is another point where I got confused.
He was basically talking about the market as if it's more than just the one transaction. It's all of the transactions out there. So essentially people can figure out a way to seem like they're cheating the market on one end, but then that causes another problem, which makes things more expensive somewhere else. I mean, he's basically saying the same thing as like, you heard him bring up airlines in the United States, because this was a big thing that all the libertarians were talking about, in that they were trying to make airplanes safer. So they said every airline has to include, belt buckles. And so what they found was that adding the belt buckles, adding the seat belts to the airplane made the price of the ticket go up, which meant fewer people were flying and more people were driving, which meant arguably there were more accidents and people were actually less safe despite this regulation. I mean, essentially that's the kind of thing I think he's talking about here, where because I think what he realized was I reframed what he was saying and say, the commie Noam Chomsky said something similar, and he had to put like a little PS, like no, wait.
I see. Okay. Yeah, no, because like to me, like that's what capitalism is all about. Based on my experience as a capitalist, when I was running my company, here's what I did every day. Take your pick of any of the companies that I ran. What you're doing is like, seriously, this is what you're doing. You're trying to figure out how much money someone's going to pay for something. And and that's what negotiation is it's like, how much can I charge this asshole before he walks? You know what I mean? Like, how much can I, and the way that you get that, you pump that price up is through sales and marketing mostly. And this is why Apple's able to charge way more money for the same technology.
I got trained in Marxism for years.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
And this is so obvious for any Vietnamese students to think about, like, the salary you're receiving every month. When like NCAP call it, like, you can sell your labor as a service. Okay, it's like a fair trade, but it's fucking not. The nature of capitalism is to exploit workers and then obtain the surplus value.
Something that you might not know about Luna is that she went to the best business school in Hanoi and learned Marxist-Leninism while she was there.
Yes. So in the morning, I learned Marxism about how capitalism actually works. And in the afternoon, I learned macro and microeconomy about how to be a boss and how to
how to exploit workers.
How to exploit and then how to like get profit and margin surplus value, sort of fuck like that. And yes, I understand very fucking well. Like you, like NCAP said, like, you have a choice to sell your labor as a service. But it's fucking
You're a commodity.
not.
In fact, you are a commodity. Your labor is commodified. And that's one of the big points that Marx tried to make. I tried not to ever reference Marx in that debate, by the way, because I felt like they wouldn't take Marx seriously.
Yeah.
But this is a very important point.
It's very important.
Is that your labor is not, you're not selling your labor is a commodity on the market. And that drives the price of your labor down. It's a very important distinction.
The relationship between
by the way, with the college thing that you mentioned, this is really funny. So when I was first couple of years in New York, one of the places I worked as a manager raising money for Baruch College, which is one of like the major financial schools in New York. So like all of my employees were like freaking like MBAs and stuff. And at the time I was pretty radical with Occupy. And a friend of mine who is now a professional economist had brought up this thing in Marxism, like that when the price of one commodity rises, the price of another commodity often falls. And so I went to an econ professor in Baruch College, major, school. And I said to him, like, I would just kind of caught him after class, and I was like, hey, I have a question. So Marx has this assertion, and I just want to know, is there any empirical research that can prove Marx's statement here, or is this just something Marx said? And the guy kind of looked at me for a second, and he didn't answer my question. He just told me to read Milton Friedman. Which of course is Dr. David Friedman's father.
Yeah, right. That is a weird fact, by the way. It was kind of hard to process that the whole time we were talking to him, is that he's Milton Friedman. But so I guess let's continue watching.
Stock in a steel company, and is paying $20 for something that ought to cost $10 because he's.
But that's what my point was. I'll just to reiterate is that like that's what capitalism is. It's like everyone's trying to swindle everybody else. Is that it's to if you take all of the if you look at it, if you strip away
steal from both the customers and the workers
and other capitalists
and another capitalist.
That's the whole point of capitalism, is to get as much as you can get away with. That's really what it is. If you strip away everything else, it's how much can I swindle these other people, my fellow human beings.
Yep. Like workers are the special kind of customer to capitalists, where you lost your labor value every fucking month.
Yeah. Some people are wanting to find the link to the full debate, so let me just post that real quick, and then we'll continue on with watching.
Yeah, if you can message me, by the way, the link to this stream, I'll send that to Modern Day Debate, and they will add it to the full debate, so people over there can come over here and find us.
Nice. Okay, so I'll send you the YouTube link now. Hold on, I'll send that on Twitter. Okay, we'll keep watching while I send that.
Flying on an airline, and before deregulation, the government had cartelized the airlines and was pushing the prices up. So it's tempting to think, and many libertarians on my side do, of sort of a ruling class who are getting the benefits. But it's worse than that. It's a system where in one role, I get a benefit that costs you more than I get. In another role, you get a benefit that costs me more than you get. It's sort of
that's a very good point. EJ, do you want to? I have more questions on law enforcement. Do you want to take this?
I just wanted to. I guess I would jump in real quick and first of all just say there are multiple accounts throughout history. Like the Homestead strike is probably one of the more well-known. So I'll skip ahead a little bit. I also wanted to quickly respond and see what you have to say about. You said that warfare is too expensive for most business people to want to reach for in most situations. But I would say if you have an overwhelming force de majeure over, another party, warfare quickly becomes one of the cheaper ways of solving any kind of a dispute. If you know for a fact that you have a much larger shit. I just looked it up and I did misuse the word force de majeure. Fuck. I'm sure a lot of Nazis got off on that. So I meant
force de majeure.
Force de majeure means you can both. I was wrong. I thought it meant like overwhelming force, but I totally misused a word. So I hate when I do that in debate, because then everybody's gonna harp on that for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I'm a professional writer. I've never heard force de majeure.
Force majeure actually means that like both parties can leave whenever they want. I'm sure that Friedman was cackling inside when I fucked that up. But anyway, what I meant was overwhelming force, basically. Power.
You can see him cackling on the inside.
Trying to, having a disagreement with, then that's basically how mafias get started. That's how organized crime gets started. And I would see the state as just a large, overblown form of organized crime. So, and then, the last thing I'll say about that is most wars throughout history have been to profit somebody, they've occurred because it was the most expedient way to get a better deal, essentially. So I guess I just wanted to push back a little bit against that idea that warfare is too expensive for these large, powerful capitalists to do.
Look very serious here.
If you have a society with enough inequality, you're going to have a hard time getting attractive results with any of the systems you're considering.
Just look at Iraq and the Middle East. Like, the U.S. cost the fucking war just for their oil.
Yeah,
the cost of the war
that's what
is still lower than the benefits they're gonna get.
That's the point I was trying to make with my rambling question. I want to say, what did he say? Let's break this down really quick, because I think what he said there for these large, powerful capitalists to do, to enact.
If you have a society with enough inequality, you're going to have a hard time getting attractive results with any of the systems you're considering.
Right. So the whole point is that you need to reduce inequality as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I guess that his concession or his contention would be that anarcho-capitalism reduces inequality as much as possible. Is the basically? Do you think that's basically the line of thought
That
we're
seems
going with
to
here?
be his contention, or that socialism does not sufficiently address the problem of inequality, which that's like the whole thing with socialism. Now, granted, there's been times it's gone very, very wrong, but like, yeah, I like that he at least admitted inequality was really bad.
Yeah.
I should have pointed that
so
out.
Far,
actually.
neither of you has really answered my initial challenge. How do you solve the coordination problem?
Coordination.
The coordination problem. He's talking about how do you coordinate people if you don't have the free market coordinating people.
Correct.
Is that what he's saying? So yeah, that's what I thought.
What he's trying to do. So I think it was Hayek who came up with like the economic calculation problem, where basically because the USSR used a command economy, and there's big problems with the command economy with like just because an individual human brain can't hold all the information that you need to make those kinds of decisions. Like a lot of ANCAPs will like come up and be like, economic calculation problem. Solve that. And it doesn't even it does not apply at all to libertarian socialism, to no form of libertarian socialism. But he is right to bring it up in like if we're not using money, for instance, and we're not using assuming we're not doing a market anarchism thing, you do sort of need something in the place of money to work as your intelligence system, and that's why I say what I say coming up.
Okay.
I can answer that, but I'll
just
wait.
A minute. Yes.
It's like the most timid.
If you think about sort of the world we live in, it is true a billionaire has a lot of money, but there are a very small number of billionaires and a very large number of people who aren't. So if you're imagining a system where the rights enforcement agency has 1 million customers and their income is only $50,000 a year, say, that still is $50 billion worth of money of income, some of which can be spent on getting their rights protected. And you aren't going to find, you're very unlikely to find a oppressive, ultra wealthy person who is willing to spend that kind of sum in order to oppress, because as a general rule,
okay,
the profit from violating people's rights is lower than the cost to them, and they're therefore willing to spend more.
I can't believe we didn't jump on this. So say what you were going to say.
More. Now it's true.
I mean, just all of human history. Like every instance of recorded human history, whenever somebody has like that kind of wealth and power, it's like there's a reason that
like there are many that many is Jeff Bezos in this earth.
Jeff Bezos is a perfect example. Jeff Bezos throws his power around like nobody's business. I mean, like how many servants do you think Jeff Bezos has?
There are 8 people on this planet own more than a half of the whole world wealth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
and
it's even worse than that, actually. And here's the thing that I just realized he did. He's assuming that the rich person is oppressing everyone at once, and that the entire customer base is getting screwed by this one rich guy. But the rich guy is not going to screw the entire customer base. He's going to screw as many of them as he can before he provokes some sort of reaction. So obviously the rich guy is still going to be a massive danger, at least to a sizable minority of people. He doesn't have to, he doesn't have to oppress everyone to be abusing his power with regard to the private police.
The other thing is that you don't have to have $1 billion to get to the point where you can start being very coercively powerful. I mean, like you have street gangs where literally the members of the street gang are poor, but they still have the ability to, terrorize their neighborhood, with that, with just through the nature of like basically through solidarity, like if you and me and Luna all get cool jackets and we decide to start like a 1950s,
let's do that.
West Side Story street gang.
Someone in the chat, Photoshop that, please.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You say you're a jet, but they don't have a lot of money, but what they have is they have solidarity. And then it scales up with the amount of like individual power you have. And that's the problem. Like, that's the thing. Capitalists have a tremendous amount of class solidarity within the system we have right now. And that is what we call the state. The state is like the physical manifestation of the class solidarity of these people who have way too much power as individuals. And if you get, they don't even have to be millionaires, but if you get enough capitalists who have $500,000 together to form, what Dr. Freidman would call a cartel, They can then lobby the state, and if there's no state that exists, they don't even have to lobby the state. They just directly come together.
Here's the thing, like the perfect society of ANCAPs, to me, it's just like a society where the mafia and the cartels could fucking control anything. That's it.
Yeah. Well, again, like anarcho-capitalism, I really feel like a lot of them, like they seem to have it in their head because they don't have a material analysis of society. They sort of have a very ideological analysis where they think if they can just get enough people to agree that the NAP is good and that anarcho-capitalism is like A-OK, that will guarantee the society that they want, which right. is like, honestly, I don't think if you had 100% of the population convinced suddenly that anarcho-capitalism is absolutely the way to go, I don't think you could have anarcho-capitalism, and I don't think they'd like the society that would come from that.
Trekkie69 just rated. Thank you, Trekkie. I hope you're still here just long enough for me to say thank you and hello, and everybody subscribe to Trekkie69 and welcome to the Trekkie audience. Yeah, and they never did explain, I don't think, the mechanism by which dissolving the state would diminish inequality. And one thing I wanted to ask, I never got a chance to, is what does the transition look like? What happens to Amazon if we turn the lights off on the state and we say tomorrow we're anarcho-capitalists, or even if you give it a transition period of however long you want, a decade, say in 10 years we're not gonna have a state anymore. What does the transition look like, and what happens to Amazon in that situation? How do you?
That's a good question.
And I don't think it can be explained through their framework. I can explain it.
Yeah.
It's that you give Amazon to the workers. Very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Very simple. You just make it democratically owned and operated by the workers, and probably put the community in there too, so that we have some democratic, input into that as well. But we hash that all out democratically. Yeah. Their skepticism of democracy, I think, is one of the most frightening things about right-wing libertarianism in this form. Because even when I was a right-wing libertarian, I still believe in democracy, and that's something that really scares me about Friedman and Heumer, is their complete disdain for democracy.
Where Heumer says famously, and apparently Ben Franklin first said this, but like, democracy is two wolves voted and a sheep voting over what's for dinner. And I'm like,
right.
Why would two wolves need to vote?
Exactly. Precisely. Yeah, and that's why it is incumbent on us, I think, as direct Democrat. As democracy advocates, I think it's incumbent on us to explain how we design systems, so that they do avoid those kinds of problems. And we do have to take those things into consideration, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. But when push comes to shove, I can think of no better way to solve a problem that affects an entire community, such as pollution, such as distribution of material needs, that sort of thing, than trying to design a system of democracy that will fit that function.
I agree, because you got to, for people to care about something, you got to give them skin in the game. It's the same thing like when I was a manager for a number of years. Like, you ran a company for like 10 years. I was a manager. By the time I quit, I was responsible for $1.7 million. I had like 22 employees. And the thing was that one of the ways I had one of the lowest turnovers of any manager in the industry, and this was an industry with very high turnover rate. And the way that I did was I gave my employees control over their workplace and how they did their job. And I did my best to just, enable them to go out and be their best selves. And a lot of them stuck with me despite even possibly having like higher paying jobs and other things, because I did that. And it wound up saving money in the long run. It was a really good business strategy. But like, a lot of this like freaking 80s greed is good bullcrap that we've sort of inherited in the country, just not only is it toxic, but it's like, it's bad business in my opinion. But
this is exactly why I brought up Yochai Benkler. I would love to see Benkler go head to head with these guys, actually, because Benkler I think would blow them completely out of the water, because he's got all the real, like, the statistics and the data and all that shit he knows like very well. But Dr. Benkler says, like, he does this comparative research where he looks at all these different fields of human endeavor, including business, and even business is moving towards this mutual aid model, this crowdsource mutual aid cooperative model, because they're starting to find out that I was starting to get mad because I thought Luna wasn't paying attention to the stream, and I see she's looking up food, and I actually approved that because I'm getting hungry. So I approved that decision. That was a good decision, comrade.
EJ's hungies.
Yeah. No, but I was like, what the fuck? Oh, food.
If I could say, by the way, you two are absolutely adorable. Like,
we're like
it's really fun to watch.
couple.
I also, I've got to say, I'm really loving Luna's response just to everything in here. I love watching her get exasperated.
When I walked in and I said, how did it go? And she was just like she was at her computer and she's just like,
my blood is still
boiling. I guess let's skip ahead a little bit because I don't think we're gonna be able to get through the whole debate. So
no, definitely not. What's a 2-hour debate? I don't.
Yeah, we'll just jump in at random here.
That says that once you've planted wheat on it, I do or don't get to.
Oh, this is good. This is good. Perfect timing.
I
think you are confusing two different forms.
Gotta back it up a little bit.
Not just a coercive relationship between me and Uber, it's a coercive relationship between me and the passengers as well. Because if you get less than a 4.5 star rating, you lose your job.
Okay, so yeah, we're talking about. I was basically making the point that the state isn't the only source of coercion within the power dynamics of our current system, and that there are other power dynamics, that we would have to worry about if we had an anarcho-capitalist system. And I was just saying basically that, I believe that when I was driving for Uber, there was a coercive element to that relationship. Because for one thing, the reason I worked for Uber to begin with was because I couldn't find a job at the time. The economy was not doing great. And I was kind of desperate and I needed money. And I got this job with Uber. And then I was in this situation where I had many bosses. I had the Uber app that was kind of telling me what to do. I had an Uber manager that was telling me what to do. And I had my passengers. And they all had coercive power over me to where I was limited on my freedom. And this is something I think is like one of the really disgusting aspects of a capitalist employee-employer relationship is this kind of soft dominance that people have over other human beings. Like I would be in an Uber car.
The ANCAPs don't recognize at all. They don't see that that's power.
And I would have it was very disgusting and I'm glad that I'm lucky that I was a white, male presenting person, because I was hearing people say disgusting things in my car, and it was in my car, my personal vehicle.
Yeah.
And under any other circumstances, I would have been like, get the fuck out of my car. You're disgusting. Like they're saying racist shit. This happened a lot. I was in Charleston, if that gives you any indication. And but I was in the system where I had to put my head down, shut up, and say nothing, or risk my employment, risk the food that I would be putting on my table. And that is a very disgusting form of coercion that one human being can have over another human being.
Yeah.
And there's nothing under anarcho-capitalism that addresses that. Whereas under an anarcho-socialist system, if I were in some situation where I was driving for somebody else for, I don't know what, I don't know how, I could see a socialist sort of Uber. This is where markets might be useful, because maybe there's a system where we have like, I drive for people and I get points in some kind of point card, and then I could spend those on like getting going on a vacation and staying, going on a yacht tour or something, what I mean? Like exchanging these kind of more luxurious services with each other. I think that could work. So if we had that system like that, and I got pissed at somebody and kicked them out of my car, instead of having to answer to my boss who owns the company, I would have to answer to all of my other coworkers who also drive cars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we would all talk to each other, and I would say, yeah, the guy was an asshole and he said racist shit and I kicked him out of my car. And then presumably, hopefully my coworkers would have had those same experiences and back me up on it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a much more, again, it's where democracy solves these problems, which are hard problems, not easy problems to solve. But I can't think of a better way to solve it.
Not even that, but so I didn't know that you would lose your job if you got a lower than a 4.5 rating, which is out of 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's insane.
And you had people who would constantly say, this was awful. I never give a 5-star rating because I don't believe in perfection. There's always room for improvement. I would have people say that all the time. And I would have to very timidly explain to them, like, while I'm driving my car, like, well, just so you know, if you do give me a 4-star rating, that is a vote for me to get fired, because if our ratings are, and they didn't know that, and they're like, I didn't know that. I give people 4-star ratings all the time, and they feel like bad about it because nobody wants to like get people fired. You know what I'm saying? But the Uber doesn't explain that to people.
It's so fucking weird. Just give people a fucking 5-star. What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Does it cost you
because it's
$20 or
commodification.
something?
It's commodification of human
Even
beings.
worse, though, think about the people who not only are in that situation, but don't own the car and have taken one of those predatory loans from Uber, so that they're paying Uber essentially, like for the privilege of working for Uber. Like it's hugely coercive. And this is the thing, like Dr. Friedman, he seems like a really cool dude. I really enjoyed talking to him and stuff, but he was being the son of Milton Friedman. He was definitely raised very well to do. And, I identify with that in the sense, like, I was never part of the 1%, but like my dad's a doctor. So like we didn't have any major financial problems when I was growing up. And like a lot of the time when I was a right libertarian, I was like, what is fine? Poverty? What? I guess there's a couple people, maybe it's a little harder for them. But like, if you don't have that direct experience, you don't really have a concept of how coercive the society can be. I got that concept because I moved to New York City and, tried to live here as like a freaking artist, which was like one of the, and then having to deal with like the rent in the city and the hours that you need to work and everything else. Like you very quickly learn what a precarious position most people are in.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of ANCAPs either don't have that experience or they're kind of doing like the Uncle Ruckus thing, where they think if they love their captor enough, if they lick boots enough, they'll somehow be spared.
And this is something where, first of all, thank you, Michael Malloy, for the super chat. It says, hello, I just finished the video. I'd like to report in as a murderer for not personally ending capitalism. I do hope we get to that. We might not. But if you don't know what we're talking about and you want to know, you could watch the full debate. That was a very ridiculous
It was
thing.
The most ANCAP thing he said the whole night. Like
yeah, seriously. Shit. It was very much like I could see the neck, the beard growing in on his neck when he said that. But anyway, back to the point, Dr. Heumer, something he said in one of the lectures that I saw was he talked a lot about the aesthetics of power. Okay. And I think that this is something where like, I see this disconnect in the thought process, because Dr. Heumer talked about how the state does all of these things to build an aesthetic of power. And, he talks about the studies where people who wear uniforms, people are more likely to obey them. They build giant buildings with massive interiors and massive columns. And they do all of these rituals to, build up the power of the state, impress you and intimidate you into doing what you're told by the state. And capitalists do the same exact thing. Have you ever been inside of a bank?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen how big a bank lobby usually is? Have you ever been inside of a CEO's office? I've been in a lot of CEO's offices. I see the way that they arrange their
Did you want me to tell you the story about my fucking Vietnamese, the worst boss ever in the world that I ever have worked for? I worked for him for 11 months and I cried openly in the office. I cannot stop it 3 times in 11 months. It's so horrible. Like the whole, like he turned his villa into a company and he forced every workers to go like 10-15 miles every day more, just instead of like go to his house to work. And then the whole company shared the first floor. He himself spent his whole huge office in second floor, and that's it. It's like his own fucking kingdom.
Yeah.
And it's so
I did that
horrible.
when I was a capitalist. I had an office. I had all my workers. I'm gonna totally flat out admit this, and it was a tactical, intentional thing that I did. I had all my workers work in an open. It wasn't cubicles. It was like an open system. So like all these desks were kind of pushed together. It was an open floor plan, and I had my little office with a glass window. And because it was like I want to be able to. I wasn't that much of an asshole boss, but I did play kind of power games like this. And I was like, I want to be able to look out my window anytime and see what everybody's doing. Yeah. And I was like, and I want to, I want people to know that I have an office. It was very important to me when I was looking for like real estate, like where I was going to build my office. I was like, I have to have my own office, because if I have to share an office with somebody else, they're not going to respect me as the boss. And I mean, like at the time, I didn't realize that I was being like a coercive, dominating person. I was a right-wing libertarian, and I thought that use of coercive force was wrong. I didn't process. It was a disconnect where I didn't realize that I was doing the same thing that like a president is doing or a police officer is doing in building that division and in having that kind of a dynamic. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also, if you are in the position of a manager or a boss, it's also somewhat important just to you getting the thing that you need done to have that. Like I did the same thing as a manager when we built an office on 35th Street. I love that office. Beautiful view of Manhattan. And it was an open concept that our CEO had decided on. And, we came in, we put in the desks and everything's cramped because it's New York and I don't have an office. So what I did was we put a big desk in the at the one end of the room so I could see everybody. And the CEO had picked out like this kind of little, fairly cheap desk, and I was like, no, we can't do that. And they're like, why? And I'm like, you can see my legs under that desk. That is going to pull from my authority. And so like we got this big wooden desk that people used to joke like there should be a presidential seal on it. And I also made sure that the company got me a chair that was just like everyone else's chair, but a little bit better.
Oh yeah, no, and a little higher. That's the thing that I see a lot. You'll see a lot where, because when I was doing advertising, I was in and out of CEOs' offices all the time, and they would always have their chair like a taller chair for themselves than the people that were sitting across from them, just to give them that little bit of a power dynamic. And, but the funny thing too is
in church and in court, the judge is way up there, the priest stands from the pulpit.
Yeah, right. One funny thing though, this is total aside, but I used to have a mutualist business, a camera shop with Grant the Slopstash, which we do at channel youtube.com/slopstash. But basically it was a camera shop and we owned it together. We didn't have employees. That was one situation where I wasn't actually exploiting workers. But Grant was the one who basically ran the shop most of the time. And I did like most of the marketing and the books and all this kind of stuff. So, but Grant didn't want, he was one of the owners of the company, one of the two owners. He had total authority and power over everything, but he didn't want the customers to know that. So he always wore a clip-on tie with short sleeve shirts so that he would look like a middle manager. And so if people like asked him for a deal or whatever, he'd be like, "Oh, sorry, I don't have the authority."
Oh my God. I literally used to train my my employees to do something like that. Because we would have one of the things that we had premiums that we could give people for donating. We were raising money for the arts, and so we would call people and try to get them to be like, "Hey, if you give today, you can get such and such premium." Now, the thing is, we could give the premiums at our own discretion whenever we wanted to, but we always acted like it was a pizza place and like we're running this special right now. And I made sure that my employees never let the people we talked to know that they could give away that premium at any time, because if they did, those people would just start demanding the premiums.
And they tell their friends about it too.
Yeah, exactly. So instead, like, it was better that they pretended like they didn't have the power to do it, so that they could, if somebody asked for it, they could be like, "Oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. But I'll tell you what, if you do a little bit more," that's what we've moved to now.
But like all of the stuff we've been talking about, does it not? It's not like anybody, and we've all had these experiences, right? We've all had these experiences. Maybe not from different points in the hierarchy, but we've all had these ridiculous. So capitalism creates a society that runs on manipulation, deceit, lies, distrusting each other, trying to constantly pull fast ones on each other. It's all about dominance and manipulation. And how could anybody think that this is the best way to organize society?
This is the best that we got, so we better stay with it forever.
Like, this is what we all do. We all have to, like, I have one business partner who has to have a clip-on tie and short sleeve shirt so he can lie to people and tell them that, "Oh, I don't have the power to do things," so that they can't manipulate him. And then I'm sitting here, giving myself this nice office so that I can look out on my employees. So that it's like we're all having to manipulate the shit out of each other all the time. When you call customer service, you have to manipulate them. They're trying to manipulate you. We're all trying to manipulate the fuck out of each other.
Capitalism is all about manipulate the scarcity.
And I do not, and like, the ANCAPs would say, "Oh, that's human nature. And we're all going to be trying to do this shit for our own personal gain and all that." I don't think that that's natural. It doesn't feel natural to me. No. Right? Like, at the end of the day, all I can really know for sure is what's happening in my own brain, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe I am like the weirdo, the lone wolf or something. But to me, I do not want to live in this kind of society where I'm constantly having to lie and be lied to.
Exactly.
I don't want to live in this kind of society.
Do kids naturally always want to lie to their parents?
We teach our children not to do the shit that we tell people to do in business school.
Exactly.
We teach our children to share. We teach our children to be honest with each other. We teach our children to cooperate. And then when they turn 18, we send them to, well, really it starts a lot earlier than that, but we send them to business schools and we say, "Okay, all that shit we talked about, cooperating, everything, forget that."
Yeah.
Fleece these people for as much as you possibly can. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, in the sense that we were doing it, like, I like to think we were doing it for good, because like we were funding the arts and we were getting people to actually go out and sit. But yeah, like, I think if I had to do that to sell people windows or something, I'd jump out a window.
Well, I mean, and honestly, in the kind of society that we want to build, there would be no reason to do that because the arts would be owned universally by everyone together, and we would all have the capability. We would all have way more time to, work on the arts. I mean, like Kropotkin talked about that. Once the bread is secured, the luxury and art and science are the supreme aim. So
it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. And here's the thing, I think that many people like me too. I don't want to be millionaire or billionaires. I just want to have a decent life on enough. Because like if I own a billionaire, I cannot like use them all in my lifetime. That's to me it's useless. I just need enough for me to live.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing here. I kind of honestly just want to be able to earn a nice middle class life for me and my family and send my kid to college. And I wanted to earn that, like continuing to do what I was put on this earth to do, which is to write and to create art. And
it's like the great anarchist philosopher Puff Daddy said, "No money, no problems."
Yeah, totally. It's funny. Well, actually, let's move a little bit. I want to see more of this debate.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I want to see Dr. Freedman's response. At least that was the way it was when I was driving. So I was saying, just to recap, I was saying that there are other forms of coercion. Where I have this coercive relationship where I have passengers in the backseat of my car. We already talked about this. So you were talking about all wealth. You do what I tell you. Sorry. Okay. So I had basically just said there are other forms of coercion in addition to just the state having power over people. That's basically what I was saying.
Something else. The other is a commons, which is the situation when you have no property. A commons is the situation where anybody can use it, so that says that
you do what I tell you to, or I will violently
force you to do other.
I don't object.
I think you are confusing two different alternatives to private property. One of them is social ownership, and that requires some mechanism by which somebody decides who can use it.
Okay, which is what we advocate for: social, collective, cooperative ownership. That's what we advocate for. And he's saying that we don't have a mechanism for coordinating that, and we do, which is well-designed systems of democracy.
The land, right? If the land is owned by all of us, there is something.
Which indigenous people, by the way, for thousands of years used collective, cooperative management of land, long before the capitalist state ever came to destroy their... And the Vietnamese as well. Yeah, that's true.
However it's organized, that says that once you've planted wheat on it, I do or don't get to plow it up for doing something else.
Like people did this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Long before recorded history.
Yeah, the vast majority of the time that we have lived on this planet, like we've been on this planet 250,000 years. The state structure has been around for 5,000 to 6,000 years, and we've had capitalism for not even 1,000, I don't think. At this point, the vast majority of that time, we were communists. Yeah, a few hundred years, 1700s to today.
The other is a commons, which is the situation when you have no property. A commons is the situation where anybody can use it, so that the air.
Which is not exactly. I mean, I don't know. I'm not. Maybe there's some other specific lexicon that uses commons differently, but like in terms of the way that peasants used the commons.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a situation where it was a free-for-all. It was very carefully managed, actually.
Well,
and that's the way that commons work today in Vietnam as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, what he's getting at is the tragedy of the commons, which has been this like major, like the ANCAPs think the tragedy of the commons is this major defeater for all of socialism. And they'll link it. And then like the people who did the tragedy of the commons paper, that like it's been pointed out that only applies to like people who think like capitalists.
Yeah, right. Well, no, and the tragedy of the commons totally breaks down if you come to Vietnam, because like if you come to Vietnam and you look at the public facilities, they're like kept really in really good condition and people respect them. And I've never seen anybody, abuse the equipment. Like, and when you see people who are like vandalizing, this has been also proven, time and again. The reason people vandalize their quote unquote common properties is because they feel voiceless. They feel it's like Martin Luther King said, like riots are the language of the unheard. When people are out there, breaking windows in public housing projects, it's not because they're animalistic. It's because it's because the public, like there's a great documentary. I wish I could remember the name of it, but it's about Gonzales Gardens, which is this like massive public housing project, I think in Chicago. And they filmed it, I think, in the 70s or the 80s. This is a long time ago that I saw this. But like they talked about how they built these really big, and originally the idea was build big, massive public housing projects that are like luxuriously appointed and like really well designed or whatever. That was the original idea. And then of course, like through the development of it, they turned into these like big concrete buildings, and then they were not very well maintained and they started to fall apart. And then it was like, it turned into this just horrifying slum, you know, like, but a vertical slum. And, you know, you had all kinds of problems with people like, you know, vandalizing and that sort of thing, but it was because it was already horrible to begin with. And you have people like basically lashing out against the system, which is completely disregarded their humanity. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's very obvious to me that if you have a voice, if you feel like you have a voice and you have some ownership over your own life, things like that don't happen. And that's why in Vietnam, I honestly believe, because people feel like they have more direct control over their own lives. And that's something, you know, again, this is something where if we're talking about the national government of Vietnam, I actually scratch everything I just said, because the national government of Vietnam is very disconnected from the people. But, you know, and that's a big criticism I have of the Vietnam state. So if everybody thinks that I'm trying to just kiss Vietnam's ass here, I have plenty of criticisms. And one of them is that the hierarchical nature of the state in Vietnam makes it so that there is almost no connection between like the people in the highest offices and the people on the street. But the way that the ward governments and the localized governments are run is very anarchistic, and like everybody gets to show up to the government meetings, the local government meetings. Everybody elects directly the ward. I don't remember the warden, I guess you'd say, like the leader of the ward or whatever. Maybe Luna could explain this better, actually.
Yes,
now that you're back, I'm struggling here. I'm trying to explain the way that your local like ward level government works and how anarchistic it actually is.
Every street would be called as a ward, and then everybody will be the member, and they will vote to choose what do you call the ward leader, and he actually just like have to bring the ideas from the people to the local government. And that's it. And like usually like every month or every week, something like that, or whenever there's problem, all the leader will like announce everybody to go and meet. And in the local government meeting or something, and they will talk about what they complain and what they want to work for, and then vote for it.
They also localize a lot of the organs of the government to this very granular level. So, for instance, every ward, and this is how many people are typically in a ward? Would you guess? I know you don't know exactly, but it's 100. Like 100, maybe a couple hundred. Every ward has like a clinic with a doctor and a nurse. Every ward has a militia. Armory. You know, so there's an armory. So literally, and this is something that I think is very important. And it kind of, to me, solves one of those sticky problems of gun ownership, you know, because like, you know, what if you don't want to live next to somebody who owns guns or whatever? Like, basically, the way that I believe it functions here, and if it doesn't work this way, I think you could design a system that does work this way. But it's basically where, like, if the state became tyrannical, or if somebody started to take too much power, making it localized like that, where every community has an armory and militia members that can go grab those guns at any time. I think that Vietnam designed
that. And we have the family consultant too in every ward.
Oh yeah, that's true. Luna and I used to know the family social worker, basically, who, if anybody has problems with their family or whatever, they can go. They get free counseling, basically. So it's a really, really interestingly designed system. It puts everything on this very local level, and I think that one of the reasons they designed it this way, so that every community has their own little militia and their own little armory, is in case they ever became imperialized again, they could very quickly, instantly have these local militias arm themselves, because that's something that Von Zapp talked about a lot, was how the big problem they had was not having guns.
Yes.
So even though gun ownership is illegal basically in Vietnam,
but we all got
there
trained.
Is access to guns. And Luna was trained on using guns.
I was trained on using AK-47 and grow grenades since I was like
throwing
grenades. I know a number of leftists that they're obsessed with you now.
So I don't know. That's kind of a long tangent. I kind of want to go back to see what else Friedman has to say here.
It's pretty much a commons in our society.
Language.
The ocean is largely language as a commons. That's right. Language.
It's not a commons in our society though, because a corporation can pollute it, and I can't do anything to stop them. So you can't really say that I have
makes it a
the
commons.
Same level of ownership
That's
as
the
a CEO.
one of the problems with the commons is that people can use it in ways that reduce its value to others.
This is something Heumer talked about a lot too. Is just the
what? What does that mean?
Okay, so basically, and by the way, you could see the delay here because I was talking about the air thing after they had already started talking about language, so I wasn't intentionally ever stepping on anybody. But anyway, they're basically what Dr. Friedman is saying is that the air, for instance, is owned commonly. Nobody owns the air, right?
Yeah.
He's refusing to grant this. What I'm saying though, which is that if nobody owns something, then everybody owns it. Those, to me, in my mind, it's important to make that clarification.
Yeah.
There's no, you can't, like, if nobody owns something, a rock, if there's a rock outside and nobody owns it, then everybody owns it.
Yeah.
Everybody has the equal amount of ownership of that. And the air is a great example of that. So, like, if you're going to say that the commons is something where
nobody owns anything,
everybody can do whatever you want, like, yeah, so you'd have to say, like, okay, this is where I think his logic breaks down. I think I just actually I wish I had this epiphany when we were talking.
Well,
if it's true.
Yeah, it's
go
dependent origination. Like, it's a Buddhist concept where.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Where certain things, like, basically up and down is a good example. Hot and cold. These things are essentially two sides of the same coin. So owned property and theft are dependently originate. You can't have theft without property, and you can't have property without theft. It's the Buddhist way of saying what I believe you're thinking, which is when no one owns something, everyone owns something.
Yeah. And that's why I was trying to talk about John Locke John Locke said that the earth is a gift from nature. If you're going to say that the air is owned, is a commons, if you're going to say that the air is a commons, I think, first of all, that logically would extend itself to say that if the air is a commons, then the land is also a commons. And this is what I was trying to say, that, like, originally nobody owned the earth, nobody owned any land, because everybody owned it. They're to say that nobody owned it is to say that everybody owned it originally, until one person or one group of people stepped onto the land and said,
with power, and then this is
my land, and you can work on it for me. You can get the fuck off, or I will beat you with the stick. That happened at some point, and that chain of ownership, and you can document. Actually, it did happen in recorded history with many of the with much of the land in the United States of America, because we can document historically that when the white settlers arrived, it was land held in common by the community, who managed it together collectively, and then white people came in and said, "Get off this land; it's ours." We can document that happening, and that chain of ownership to this day. Like, if my parents own a house, they bought it from somebody who bought it from somebody who inherited it from somebody. It all goes back eventually to a violent act of theft.
It all goes back to Thanksgiving.
It all goes back to Thanksgiving. You're right, Lynn. This is getting, we're moving into the holiday season, so let's not forget.
Oh, God, yeah. Hang on, there's a great thing that you mentioned there with the Shawnee chief Tecumseh, where he actually was speaking to William Henry Harrison. And I just realized it didn't show up because I searched on Bing like some kind of jackass. Hang on, let me use Google. One of my first jobs out of school was I was in a production about the life of Tecumseh, which is why I'm aware of this. But literally the here, you can play the thing while I find it.
Okay, gotcha.
But they can't stop you from using it.
And the only way that I can think of to solve this problem of making decisions is through democracy, which democracy can be designed well, or it can be designed poorly. But how can you decide how much we pollute the air as an individual? That's not something that any individual should ever get to make that decision about, because it affects every design well. So how do you solve the problem?
Yeah, if you look at the chapter on market failure and the market for law in third edition of Machinery, one of the examples, I give a couple of examples. There are cases where there isn't a good market solution. And the question is, do you put up with a suboptimal situation, which is going to be more air pollution than will be desirable?
Is he basically saying, like, yeah, we should have a collective democratic system for managing, for regulating the air quality?
This is my problem or something. Like, I understand very well whenever you and Brenton say anything, but when professors said anything, like, I'm so confused.
Well, he's throwing around a lot of
terminology,
academic terminology. He's a professor,
yeah.
Which is why a lot of people will come out of this saying, no matter what, there are people who will come out of this, unfortunately, saying that he won because he used more flowery language. Whereas I have intentionally, over the last 3 or 4 years tried to simplify my language and make it as accessible as possible.
So here we go. This was the thing I wanted to read, just so because just how far back this fight goes. So this is Tecumseh to future President of the United States, William Henry Harrison. I'm going to be jumping around a bit. But I would say to him, brother, you have the liberty to return to your own country. You wish to prevent the Indians from doing as we wish them, to unite and let them consider their lands as a common property of the whole. You take the tribes aside and advise them not to come into this measure. You want by your distinctions of Indian tribes and allotting to each a particular to make war with each other. You never see an Indian endeavor to make the white people do this. You are continually driving the red people when at last you will drive them into the Great Lake, meaning like Michigan, where they can neither stand nor work. Since my residence at Tippecanoe, we have endeavored to level all distinctions, to destroy village chiefs whom all mischiefs are done. It is they who sell their land to the Americans. Brother, this land was sold and the goods that were given for it was only done by a few. In the future, we are prepared to punish those who propose to sell land to the Americans. If you continue to purchase them, it will make war among the different tribes. At last, I do not know what will be the consequence among white people. And now here we get down. Sell a country? Why not sell the air, the great sea, as well as the earth? Did not the Great Spirit make them for for the use of all of his children? How can we have confidence in white people?
Wow, that is really, really powerful.
Yeah,
this is what I'm trying to study this stuff more, myself too, because like this is again a situation where we actually have, and just recently occurred to me is that we actually have documented history of the erection of capitalism and the state and just all these power dynamics that go back thousands of years in Europe, but we can actually witness it happening in real time through documented history. With the way that settlers. I don't know why I never really realized that until recently, but just like in the last couple of weeks, I've started to realize that. And it's very interesting because like we don't know who the first freaking feudal lord in the USA was, but there are indigenous societies not all of them. There were hierarchical indigenous societies. I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but we do have documented examples of flatly hierarchical, anarchical, kind of like, agrarian societies where there were no liege lords. And then we can actually see what happens when the first use of coercive violence comes in and occurs. And I think that's a really good example of that. Like, how can you sell the air? And if Dr. Freidman would admit that the air is a commons, and that seems to be implying that it's okay to set up some kind of collective democratic system for regulating air pollution. Did you interpret that the way I did, Brent? That's the way I interpret what he's saying.
That's what that sounds like what he was saying to me.
And if that's go ahead.
I mean, if that's the case, we have room to work with him there. I would say.
True, that's true. But he's got to admit that the land is no different. And if he has to admit that land is no different, then that's where we start coming into where we got to push hard that what is the difference between a piece of land that you didn't make, that you didn't toil with your own labor to make, maybe you improve it, maybe other people improve it, but certainly you didn't make the land, right? So that's pretty basic. And what's the difference between that and a massive piece of factory equipment that you also didn't make? And that, as Kropotkin would say, was made by a long line of people who put blood and sweat and gave their lives to develop this machinery
just
over
like
generations.
The landlords, they don't build their house, the workers build their houses.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, just one more thing while we're reading Indigenous history, I wanted to read this letter from Andrew Jackson talking about the Cherokee removal, and because we talked about this a little bit later in
with the happy slave myth that you brought up, which I'm so happy you brought that up, by the way.
Which is like, because what they're going to argue later, I'll try to skip ahead actually after we finish this one little part with Freidman, but they're going to basically make the argument that if you're helping somebody, then it's like okay to exploit them, right? So this is what Andrew Jackson said, wrote this about the removal of the indigenous people in the USA, or what we now call the USA. So doubtless it will be painful to leave the graves of their fathers, but what do they more than our ancestors? This is a badly written sentence, but what do they more than our ancestors did, nor than our children are doing? Like, what did they? So basically, what he's saying is, what did they do that our ancestors didn't do? Why do they deserve the land more than we do? Basically, is what they're saying. So this is a horrible sentence. Okay, to better their condition in an unknown land, our forefathers left all that was dear in earthly objects. So he's making this comparison that, like, because our ancestors came over across the Atlantic Ocean from
And
Europe
stole their
to
land.
found America. Yeah. He's making this comparison that is equitable to forcefully removing the Native Americans and sending them on the trail of tears. He's saying that that's like an equivalency. It's like, okay, well, their ancestors, now they have to go on this journey away from their ancestral land, just like our ancestors did. Yeah. It's fucking disgusting. But anyway, I will continue.
It's totally disgusting. And what's interesting though, for a lot of people, that's actually the truth. In that, there were people that came over to the United States voluntarily, but a lot were transported against their will.
If Andrew Jackson were a descendant of a slave, maybe this would hold like a teeny tiny bit more water.
Yeah, but he's definitely not.
He's definitely not, and I still don't. Even then, it wouldn't justify it. But okay, so he continues: our children, by thousands yearly, leave the land of their birth to seek new homes in distant regions. Can it be cruel in the government when, by events which it cannot control, the Indian is made discontent in his ancient home to purchase his lands, give him a new and extensive territory, to pay the expense of his removal, and support him a year in his new abode? How many thousands of our own people would gladly embrace the opportunity of removing to the West on such conditions? And this is, again, what is so disgusting about this capitalistic, imperialistic mindset, which is that we're doing you a favor. When I give you a job, I'm doing you a favor. I'm helping you.
Yeah.
You're enriching me. Like, the way it really works mechanically is you're enriching me, and I'm taking way more money for every hour of work you labor than you are. But I'm doing you a favor. I'm giving you a job.
Yeah.
And you owe me your gratitude. And there's no difference between a capitalist saying that about an employee. It's the same kind of coercive, deceptive use of force.
It's just like the poor farmers should feel like so happy that there is a feudal lords that hire them for like barely enough living.
And the French definitely had this whole idea that they were like civilizing the Vietnamese. Like that's like totally you see it all through the literature with the French people talking about like Vietnam and Cambodia and Indochina, that they were like civilizing this place and improving it, when in fact they were just brutally sucking wealth and heritage from the land here and from the people here.
Ho Chi Minh described colonialism and imperialism. It's just like it's like a leech with two suckers. On one side, one mouth is sucking from the colonials, of course. The other side, it sucks from its own workers.
Oh yes, that's a really
in
good.
The country.
Oh, that's such a good metaphor.
So, like, if we want to kill that leech, we have to continuously the same time cut both of the suckers, because if we just cut the only one side, it will grow up time after time.
That is such a good point, and this is something where I think that Ho Chi Minh
hence workers of the world unite.
Right, and that's why, like, I did a little bit about this in one of the videos I made. I don't remember, but Ho Chi Minh talked about, like, for everybody who's anti-intersectionalist, and I see you in the chats, by the way, you anti-intersectionalists. I've been watching. Like, this is why intersectionalism is so important, and Ho Chi Minh talked about this. So if you're a Marxist-Leninist, and I think a few of you anti-intersectionalists are, you need to go read some Ho Chi Minh, because he tried desperately for decades to get the French workers, when he was living in Paris in the 19-teens and 20s, he tried desperately to get the French workers to join in solidarity with the Vietnamese workers.
Because we are all exploiting.
Because colonialism was fucking over the French workers as well. The workers in France were getting screwed over because rather than making things in French factories, they were exporting the labor to Vietnam. And so now French working wages were getting driven down, and the Vietnamese people were being brutally exploited. And all Ho Chi Minh tried to do for decades through writing articles and going to meetings and that sort of thing was to try to get solidarity between the French and the Vietnamese, and for the French to see that the struggle of the Vietnamese people was completely intersected with the struggle of the French worker.
But the
and that's why I love that metaphor. I'd never heard that, but the leech thing that leech metaphor is a perfect metaphor for that dynamic.
And the thing that is very disgusting about imperialism, capitalism, colonialism is that, like, they gave the white worker in the mother countries a little bit of privilege.
Yep.
Than the workers in those colonials.
That's
why they create the sexism. Class, what do you call that? The difference between the workers in different countries. So, like, to keep us divided.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how the workers in the world could never unite.
Same dynamic with my grandfather in South Carolina when he was working in a company town picking cotton. and getting the company. Look, I'm so glad you brought the company script, by the way, in the debate. It's like the white workers were given just a teeny bit of a. They call it Du Bois called it the wages of whiteness. Read Du Bois if you don't believe in intersectionalism. Read about the wages of whiteness and go study South Carolina, where I'm from, and the history of the working class there, and look at why we don't have any kind of unionization here now. Why we don't have any kind of collective bargaining in the South is because the wages of whiteness made it so that white workers got a little social privilege over the black workers. They were still subjugated. They were still poor. But they were given a little bit more privilege than the black workers, which kept them from forming solidarity. Because right after the Civil War, when the slaves were first freed, there was a pretty big movement towards collectivization and unionizing in the South. But the Ku Klux Klan and all these other different forces came in and quickly dismantled all of that. And one of the ways they did that was through Jim Crow, where they gave the white people the white workers a little bit of a status and privilege over the black workers. And set
which
us
they've been doing since the beginning, like since the founding of the United States. Like if you read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States, like I think the 4th chapter is called Drawing the Color Line, and he actually goes down to like the original documents where they first started giving privileges to whites and punishing whites for like white servants for interbreeding with and mingling with black servants. And surprise, surprise, it happened after there was a joint slave revolt between white indentured servants and black indentured servants.
Yes. You see that these patterns, and this is why. Look, and I agree with Dr. Freidman when he said, but he never wanted to talk about history. When he said, like, we can't know exactly what happened in history, I was a history major in college, almost got a bachelor's in it but I was one class short. So I can't say I have a bachelor's in history, but I was a double major between media arts and history.
You can say that. You just need to be lying.
I could lie. No, but I mean, I took a lot of history courses, and so I'm not an expert historian or anything, and I would never claim to be. But we did have to learn about historiography and how we build consensus about history, and the only way to do that is to look for patterns of history. So like any given account, right? Any given account, and it is true. Like the victors can write history, and primary sources can be wrong for sure. But what you do is you look for patterns. That's the only thing you can really do for anything, for science as well, for any kind of inquiry, is you look for patterns that are like repeatable and that repeat again and again and again. And so, maybe Luna's lying about Vietnam and she's totally wrong. And maybe Brenton is lying about the early history of
police.
And maybe I'm lying as an individual about the history of South Carolina. But no, because you see the pattern repeating again and again and again and again. And maybe if we get some details here and there wrong, but that's one thing. But this pattern does emerge and occur again and again as long as coercive force is being used, as long as capitalism is allowed to fester. We see these patterns of history. And that's why it's very important from a dialectical materialist perspective to have a historical perspective. So anyway, let's see. We got, let's you want to go for about 15, 20 more minutes? Brenton?
Yeah, sounds great to me.
Okay. Let's see. Is there any specific part that you wanted to try to find?
We could try to find where he asked us if we're murderers.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. That was when Heumer came on at that point, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Heumer had just come in. And I was just like, while you're looking for this, I wanted to point out I was actually really intimidated to talk with these guys too, because they're high up. The one dude's a moral philosopher, a philosophy professor. The other guy's got like a huge amount of education, and they've written all these books on the subject and everything. But I realized,
Dr. Hughes.
Oh, sorry. I thought you wouldn't be able to hear that, but
no, that's fine.
Okay.
But I
trying
realized,
to be sneaky.
Yeah, it's good being sneaky there. But I realized, like, just the practical experience that I've had locking horns with freaking ANCAPs for 6 years. Like it really was not like I had prepared for this debate, but I think we probably would have done pretty well if I hadn't prepared at all and just gone with like just my own instincts on a lot of this. It's honestly not rocket science. And
right. And that's why I wasn't intimidated to be. I mean, like, it's a little bit intimidating. You got 2 doctors or whatever, but it's like at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I've seen their lectures and they're wrong. Like, what? You know what I mean? They've got these nice fancy pieces of paper.
Think about all the lecturers in your university teaching about the economy and Adam Smith, and then try to neglect all the things that Marx said.
Yeah.
I mean, Luna.
Did you notice David Friedman? He said that he had taught economics without taking any courses in economics. Now, granted, he may have a unique insight being Milton Friedman's son, but still, think about that for a second.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I wasn't.
We
I mean, I'm not saying that they're knowledgeable. You know, they have good arguments for ANCAPs and everything. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. Is not my point. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think the fact that they have doctorates really like gives them any kind of major edge in this kind of a discussion, because we're talking about things that you know, again, I think basically like what you were saying, we learn through our experience as workers how these systems work. You know, I mean, that's a big part of it. And in that sense, I would imagine that you and I probably have more experience than these two, you know, as workers.
Well, at least in the real world, yeah, both as workers and, you know, as managers and leaders, we've seen the system from both sides. And, you know, to tell you the truth, there's not a lot of people that have that experience.
Yeah. And I wonder if, you know, I don't know. I guess I'm at this point making baseless conjecture, but have they actually even run businesses? Because I have. And
I mean, I would assume David Friedman has, because he's making all of his money off of, he mentioned the sales of his books and writing and stuff. So I would assume he's running a business. I mean, in a way, I'm currently involved in setting up a business with one employee, me, because I'm making the jump, hopefully, into full-time writer. Thank you, COVID.
That's a completely different ball of wax. So, you know, like,
if it means we have a way to express that, like, just say whatever theory you want to. The real life university will slap you in the face.
Right. School of Hard Knocks, I think, is a
School of Hard Knocks. Yeah.
Let me find the murder line.
Up then the discussion.
That is a good.
Maybe we can work Dr.
In theory, how you coordinate things without a market and prices.
Things. Democracy might not be perfect in the.
And which is why anarchists have traditionally done property rights.
Hold on, I can't remember what it was.
And they tell you that you need.
There's
a big difference between if they're creating the problem.
That's it.
That's it. I do try to. Yeah. Okay.
We're close. I don't know if he's asked it yet, but
so for instance, there was the whole like happy slave myth during the Civil War.
Go back a little bit.
In the South, where I'm from.
Draw the line in terms of coercion, because oftentimes
can I make one point really quickly, which is that cut you off. This
See,
I didn't just cut them off. I cut you off too. This kind of rhetoric is, I think, very dangerous because it can be used to excuse.
I'm happy about that because
so
if you don't cut me off, you usually don't get a word in edgewise.
During the Civil War, or antebellum period in the South, where I'm from, where people said, "Oh, we give them food, we give them clothing, we give them everything they need. They're very happy."
I think we might be a little too far forward.
Made many speeches and wrote many essays. Well, I think sending the Native Americans. It's right after this.
Oh, you think it's after this? Okay.
If you think about it, wait a minute. I don't know. No, I think by your standards you are. Because after
that's
it. Okay, I'll go back about.
We get to. I love it that the son of Milton Friedman asked us if we were murderers.
If you think about it, wait a minute. I don't know. No, I think by your standards. Wait a minute. I have a question for both of you.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. Here we go. I'll put it back to normal speed. Here we go. Get ready, folks. This is where the big bad murder bomb gets dropped.
Murderers. If you think about it.
So he asked, "Are you murderers?"
Do that again. Just let people see that, like in its full context.
After all,
Native Americans west during displacement was actually doing them a big favor because we're giving them all this land and we're going to preserve their culture.
None of those were voluntary agreements. Those were all compelled agreements.
And that's what we're saying is that there's these kinds of patterns.
Wait a minute. I have a question for both of you. Are you murderers?
See, okay, that was so much more non sequitur than I even realized at the time. And at the time, I realized like it was very non sequitur. Yeah. But I think you had before this, you had asked the question about if I'm holding a rope and I said, "Give me your watch or I let go," right?
Yeah.
I think he's responding to that, but it was like he just glossed over my whole point about because like just to build this up. And if you want to go back and watch the full thing, go watch the full thing for the full context. But basically, Brenton made a point, which was that. I was trying to say that there's this form of coercion, which is that if I withhold food from you, I'm coercing you in a way. It's not the same as putting a gun to your head, but it's practically the same. And then Brenton made the point: if I'm holding a rope and you're dangling off of a cliff's edge, and I say, "Give me your watch," or I let go of the rope, is that a form of coercion? And then, Dr. Friedman, I think, was the one who said, "I'm trying to do this just for time's sake," but Dr. Friedman said, "There's a form of coercion where if a doctor doesn't help you." And you force the doctor to help you, then that is slavery. And so then I said, so I said, it's coercion if you withhold food from people. And so he basically, now he's saying, if I don't help everybody, then I'm a murderer by that logic. Since I'm saying, you have an obligation to not withhold food from people so that they starve to death.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's
so then that's
essentially, it's like we need to all be Schindler. Like with this ring, I could save one
but
more.
I mean, I will say one thing. I'm not withholding food from anybody. I don't have a vast store of food and like tons of food, and I'm not withholding it from people like a grocery store is. If I owned a grocery store, you can actually make the argument that I am actually killing people, because I have all this food that I'm throwing away instead of distributing to, you know what I'm saying? So there is a point to be made here, but the way that they make it is so weird, as we will see now.
If you think about it, you wait a minute.
Reaction.
No, I think by your standards you are, because after all, you live in a very rich society. You could certainly save 10% of your income if it was sufficiently important, and 10% of your income could almost certainly save several lives in the third world where there are very poor people. So if you really want to take the
does he not realize I live in the third world, and it's like
position that failing to help someone is morally equivalent to hurting someone, which I think is the position you're taking.
And it's not really so much failing to help somebody is hurting them. It's that withholding material needs from somebody so that their choice is to either work for you or starve, that is hurting somebody. It's a totally different dynamic.
Well, and also, like, failing to help someone, if there's a guy outside my house who's like dying in the cold and I don't help him, I wouldn't say that that's the same thing as murdering him, but I would say that I am in the wrong, unless there's some other extenuating circumstance. Like, I think there is a certain ethical obligation to help people when you can to the best of your ability. But I don't think it makes you a freaking murderer.
Exactly. And I do think that most anarchists that I know who are committed, serious anarchists, do everything that they can to fight for liberation struggle. And it's just that we know that individual action, like there's no ethical, it's like the whole thing. There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, and there's no individual action that anybody can take to end systemic abuse and systemic oppression.
Yeah, there's no brick we can throw that will end poverty.
Right. But and even if I donated everything away and I wore a hair shirt or whatever, it's not going to stop systemic oppression. So what we do is we commit ourselves to ending systemic oppression.
But Jeff Bezos can do that,
Jeff Bezos could end world hunger. That is true. And in that sense, he is a mass murderer. That's a good point.
That's a really good. We should use that on Jeff Bezos.
Can you get Jeff Bezos in on our next debate?
Then you have to label yourselves as murderers.
You're making assumptions here. First of all, I give more than 10%. See, I took the bait, though. I feel like I shouldn't even have addressed it.
No, I'm glad you did, actually, because that was nice. Like, essentially what that was it was an ad hominem argument. Like, he was trying to call, like, I don't know if he intended it that way, but it would sound to the audience like he was trying to call us hypocrites. Right. And so, like, we needed the I give to charity response there, even though, you did kind of take the bait.
But the bigger point, and what I wasn't trying to say I give to charity, but I was trying to say that I do try to fight to end oppression. Mm-hmm. And that, I think the most important lines here that I said were, an injury to one, no, I think you actually said that. An injury to one is an injury against all. And I said, nobody is free until everybody's free. And those are, I think, the points of anarcho-socialism, anarcho-communism, that are really what matter here. I'm kind of curious if I actually even hit those points hard enough or not. Let's see. Every year, and I could document that if
could you give more?
But that's not the point. I give as much as I'm able now. But the point is, I also
do you save as many lives as you can?
I do try to. Yes, I do try to through the process of direct action, mutual aid, and liberation struggle. I do my best, and I believe that every anarcho-communist that is principled and believes in these things does put the liberty of others. What we always say is nobody is free until everybody is free.
So I believe that you're taking action to your political ideology, but are you taking action to save the lives in the most efficient way that could be done? Right?
I try every day. This is what this is. It's an attempt to escape from complacency with suffering. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So to take an anarcho-capitalist position, you have to say, I am comfortable with thousands, millions of people dying from a lack of material needs that is completely preventable and avoidable. Mm-hmm. And the only way for me to weasel my way out of that situation and that complacency is to say, oh, well, you don't do everything you can either.
Yeah.
So it's an attempt to kind of turn the tables and deflect is what it is. When the fact of the matter is, I'm saying we have this system and it kills people. Will you help me end it? And they're saying no.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, why don't you do more? Instead of just trying to end the system that's killing people, why don't you yourself do more as an individual? It's like, well, why won't you help me to try to end the system that's killing people to begin with? Do you get what?
Yeah. It's also like almost a demand to become a martyr for the cause. Like one of the things that, one of the very unhealthy things that happens in a lot of activists' minds is they try to give, like they try to give of themselves so much that they damage themselves in trying to help other people. And the fact is that, and I think this is one of the important things about like my Buddhist philosophy, is that, you know, we kind of hold the individual and the collective to be exactly equivalent in value. Yeah. And like obviously if you get into a trolley problem and 10 people die versus one person dies, you would pick the one person in that awful trolley problem. But you know, the idea is you can't and you shouldn't sacrifice yourself for the revolution in most circumstances.
You should kick the rally out of the railway, and that's gonna save both.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like people got tricked into the way like there are only two solutions, and you choose one from the other, like out of the other, and that's it. You lack so much of imagination, so lack of the empathy and the feeling, the careness for other people. Like together, kick that rally out to save both, to save them all.
Exactly.
It's like you have the illusion of choices, but the fact is you have more than two choices.
It's a false dichotomy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to mention is something that a hardcore activist that I know, obviously not going to name names, but I was talking to somebody who is like really a serious activist and, you know, out in the streets right now, risking their life every night.
Yep.
And they said, and this I think is a really crucial point. You know, they said, I'm willing to die for the revolution, for liberation struggle, but I don't want to die in a way that won't actually materially help the revolution. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's like, and I can understand that. They're like, I'm willing to give up my life, but I don't want it to be like a futile and like valueless act that causes me to lose my life. You know, I want to make sure that if I'm going to sacrifice my entire life for the revolution, I want to make sure that, you know, it's the right place, the right time, the right circumstances. And that's like a very dramatic
way of
saying that. But it's also true that, like, you know, if somebody gives away, like if an individual has $1 million, if an individual has $1 million, if I had $1 million, which I definitely do not, but if I did, and I gave all of that money to a food bank, that's really not the best use, in my opinion, of that $1 million.
I would agree.
Because you'll feed all those $1 million, you'll feed people for however long that $1 million works until it runs out. But I believe that there are much better uses to systemically attack the capitalist system, which I see as the source of all of the privation we have.
I forget who said this. It was, but it was when I feed the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a Marxist.
Precisely. Yes, that's great. That's the nail in the coffin.
That's great.
All right, let's see what else they have to say. To save as many lives in the most efficient way as I can through the framework that I understand. I actually feel like I did that. I try every day to save as many lives in the most efficient way as I can through the framework that I understand. I do. Now, maybe there are improvements that can be made. Maybe there are mistakes that I make sometimes, etc.
Well, let's slightly change.
I don't want to make this about individuals.
Change the question. Do you think that?
Change the question. that was so like snitty of me.
Change the question.
I was so pissed. I didn't mean to get pissed. I was trying so hard not to get emotional. Okay.
Almost everyone in the world is a murderer.
No, but again, I don't think that this murderer.
I don't get the question. Look at our knit brows, like we're.
I don't get the question.
I'm not seeing how
almost nobody in the world is saving as many lives as they can. If you are, then you're one.
Okay, let me turn it around. Okay, I do believe that I, as a United States of American citizen, have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything that I can to stop the United States government from, you know, enacting imperialist war, from developing these.
I love this
giant police state
twist that
murders
you
and
do
imprisons
here.
people.
This was
so
brilliant.
I do think that by being a part of the society and having whatever benefits I get from being an American citizen, although I'm trying to change that, I do want to change my citizenship as soon as possible. But as long as I'm a citizen of the USA, I do believe that it's incumbent. And even if I somehow change my citizenship, I would still do everything I could to stop any coercive force.
I would say ethically it's incumbent on us all to do everything within reason that we can to help our fellow man to make a good faith effort. I don't think it's a good idea for us to sacrifice ourselves for others necessarily.
Are you saying that both of you are living entirely on beans?
What the fuck? Like, they don't address what we actually just said. They're going right back. It's like talking to a wall.
Yeah. Well, this is a canned, prepared argument that they've. ANCAPs love this shit. They love these like little weird like ethical. A lot of them are just like really interested in like the ethical theory that is anarcho-capitalism. I was surprised to get it from Freidman though, because he's supposedly a consequentialist anarchist, like or consequentialist ANCAP.
Well, his I will say this, like his the arguments he used in this debate were much different than the lectures that I had seen. I felt like I don't know. I don't know if he was expecting.
Well, he got thrown off. He really did by Dr. Heumer. Honestly, I don't think he's talked to many left libertarians, if any, before us.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, and he did. I mean, like, for instance, I think his point about the doctor was like a good little gotcha, but and I didn't get a chance to say this. Like, so honestly, as far as like that parceled, contained debate goes, I think he won the point there. I did have a response to that. I just didn't get a chance to throw it out there. But like, because his point was good when he said, if a doctor doesn't want to treat you for cancer unless you pay them, and you make them treat you for cancer, then that's a form of slavery, right? And I think that was a solid point. I do have I think a solid response though, which is that I don't want doctors treating me that only treat patients for the financial benefit.
Yeah, and almost no doctors are in it for the financial benefit. Like those that, like, my dad is a doc, and like honestly, he's kind of been miserable at his job for a number of years. I think he really just wanted to run a mom and pop grocery store or something. But like doctors, oftentimes they have one of the highest suicide rates of like any profession, and it's because a lot of them really care, and they got into the business because they wanted to help people, and hey, the money is nice. Now some of them, there's like surgeons in particular tend to have a high psychopath level because it makes it easier for them to do their job, and maybe they're cash motivated primarily. But also, I'm not sure I want a psychopathic surgeon working on me who's only interested in cash. Yeah. I mean, maybe
and we have
like really,
the
really
first
good.
like evidence of surgery. Like there were ancient people who, like, how many thousands of years ago was it? The skull where they did brain surgery on somebody.
Yeah,
like somebody took it upon themselves to try at least to heal somebody in this really. And this was long before capitalism, and I think it was even predated agrarianism. Like people, and there's all kinds of evidence that people took care of disabled and sick people, in these like pre-agrarian societies. I think humans have this instinct to nurture and save each other's lives. And I think building a system where people become doctors not for the financial reward, but because they actually want to heal people. That's the society I want to live in. That's the doctor I want to have.
That's when we're going to have the best doctor, the best engineers, and the best artists in the world, because there's no money motivation in it. They just do what the fuck they want with the best ability they can.
One of my favorite philosophers.
I do believe that.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this guy. One of my favorite philosophers, genuinely one of the smartest people I've ever encountered in my life, is Alan Watts. Have you heard of him?
Yeah, I've definitely heard the name before. I'm really. I told you earlier I'm really shitty with names. But if you talk about it a little bit, maybe
Alan Watts. So he's a philosopher who started out. He was like a guy. He was like a minister in the Church of England, like the Anglicans, and he went and studied with the Zen Buddhists, and then came to the United States and made
I believe that he is referenced in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, if I'm not mistaken.
I definitely would, because he talks a lot about Zen. He made a career basically out of explaining Buddhism in terms that Westerners could understand. And also, by the way, a confirmed Kropotkinite anarchist. He said that on there is a stream where he was recorded and said explicitly.
And he does the lectures about LSD, right?
Yes, that's he does a lot of lectures.
I've seen the I've seen the Watts LSD lectures. Okay, yeah, I get you. Okay,
so
sorry.
My point is, he actually, there's a great video that you can look up. It's by like the after school or whatever, SKOOL. It's called like what happens if you only pursue pleasure. And it's a fun thing for people to watch, but one of the great things in the video is he talks about like when he does vocational guidance for students, and they're like, well, you know, we want to do this, and what he does is he takes them and guides them down to what they really, really want to do, and tells them just do that, forget the money, and
right.
Like that is the most healthy way to approach the division of labor within society. And
yes,
it's
no. You're firing off all these neurons in my brain, because now I'm thinking about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is another great book. You know, I don't agree with I think that Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is interesting because it starts off really strong, and then it gets really, really strong, and then the last like third of it just kind of falls apart.
I'll get a copy of the book and read the first 2/3.
Yeah, no, read the whole thing, because I don't know. I don't like the way it ends and the kind of some of the conclusions that he draws. But he talks about education. And I really like some of the points he makes, which is like, first of all, and this, I really wish we brought this up. I kept trying to find a way to bring it up, but it just never became relevant. But like a lot of these jobs that anarcho-capitalists say are like, you know, valueless jobs and people shouldn't get paid a lot for are absolutely vital to the functioning of society, which the COVID-19 proved. Like, we need people working at Taco Bell. There are people that will starve without Taco Bell.
They got paid like shit. And then suddenly now they become the essential workers.
Yes, grocery store workers, Taco Bell. And then, but the Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, he talks about mechanics. And people say that like, oh, if you don't go to college and you don't get a degree and you're not a mechanic, then you're like, you know, a blue collar loser or whatever. But it's like, what would our world look like if we didn't have mechanics? What would our world look like if we didn't have janitors?
Yeah.
How would a hospital function if you didn't have somebody cleaning the hospital?
Exactly.
One of my personal heroes, Buenaventura Durruti, he was a mechanic. Like, yeah, it's my cousin's a mechanic, and like every family needs three. Every family, I think, needs in the family a mechanic, a doctor, and a lawyer.
Oh my God, I got one of the three. If I had the other two, I would have probably gotten off a lot of jams a lot faster. That's for sure. No, well, every community should have, you know, free access to mechanics, doctors, and lawyers. I think is really the wider point. But yeah, I guess kind of I guess for me to kind of, I guess this will be the last point that I make. But we have these jobs that are essential for society to function, and yet we don't value them, and the market does not value them. The market severely, if you want to say that like the invisible hand of the market will like match everything to, you know, where everybody gets paid what they deserve or whatever, these
you know
jobs,
why it is invisible? Because it doesn't
exist.
exist.
Did you just make that up? That's gold. That's my new joke. Oh,
you know why the invisible hand is invisible? Because it doesn't exist.
That is so good.
I feel like you could really get a lot of like the YouTube atheists with that one.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm doing a whole video on that. Somehow that's going to be a whole script.
That'll be terrific.
Intellectual property, copyright Luna, but I'm taking it. I'm seizing it. But my point is that the market undervalues this labor severely. And I guess that's the last point I guess I'll make for the time being. And I'll let you and Luna have the final words.
Yeah, I mean, Luna, do you? What I'll say is,
why don't you? Brenton's the guest, so why don't we have Luna go, and then you can have the last word. So.
I don't know. I hate end caps. I hope that. God damn it! Just stop being end caps.
Well said.
Well said.
Eloquently put.
I think someone needs to. Yeah, we need to loop that or something.
Yeah, that's going to the highlights.
Yeah. What I will say is, well said.
Oh, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, you kicked ass in this debate, and I was really happy to be paired with you because you, you supplemented me in ways that I did not.
I do feel we filled in each other's gaps really well because, like I was saying to you offline, like you had the history stuff covered and all the names and dates that I suck at. And I feel like I brought in some of the theory stuff. Like I think we really did fill in a lot of like gaps and that sort of thing. Really well. Although you had the history strong, I think you would have done well without me, but I don't think I would have done well without you. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So.
Well, I'll take that compliment just because I've been doing a lot of these debates. But
yeah, it's my number 2.
Yeah, but also without you in there, like half the people who watched the debate wouldn't have watched it. So thank you on that one. So what I wanted to say to the audience here again, my name is Brenton Lengel. You can get my link from the description or just Google my name. The things that you guys might be interested in is my comic series, Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, and I will totally send you the digital copies of it if you want it, and we'll get you a signed copy somehow. And then also, I wanted to let people know, so I have written a movie, which I am turning into a graphic novel. I will be eventually doing a Kickstarter for it, about Buenaventura Durruti, who is basically the anarchist Che Guevara. I talked a little bit about him. Yeah, this dude is so badass, I can't even. He started out as a mechanic and a factory worker, and under his direction, and many other anarchists, not just him, like for the very first time, a modern mechanized army was defeated by a force of farmers and factory workers, and it's brilliant. So I've written a movie about his life that will probably never get made, but hopefully very soon it will be made into a graphic novel. And
holy shit! Well, hey, if you ever need a director or a cinematographer or anything like that, I do have a whole career in the film industry, and I would absolutely kill to participate in the crew. However,
absolutely. Well, let me know if you want to see the script. I'd be willing to send it to you.
Oh, for sure. I would be thrilled to look at it. In fact, cool. Here's one thing I've always wanted to do, and this will never happen because of a million reasons. But I want to one day do, like, if I could do any project just for fun. I want to do you remember like the Young Einstein and there was another one too.
The Big Bang Theory?
No, Young Frankenstein and Young Einstein. Did you see?
Yeah. I've seen Young Frankenstein. I haven't seen Young Einstein.
Maybe I'm not thinking correctly about Young Einstein. I feel like there was a Young Einstein. I don't know. But anyway, I want to do Young Kropotkin. And it's just like a farce like comedy of like how Kropotkin came to become an anarchist, because there's a lot of kind of interesting stories in the background. And it would be kind of loosely based on fact, but very like Mel Brooks, Monty Python humor kind of thing.
That sounds really cool. And it is inherently hilarious because he's like a prince.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I like that you're like probably one of the only bread tubers who's actually read Kropotkin, by the way. So well done on that.
I mean, Kropotkin is really who sealed the deal with me for anarchism. I've of course read a lot of great people since then, but
Young Kropotkin in Monty Python style.
Wouldn't that be great?
Be really funny.
I wouldn't probably be the one to write it necessarily. I might be able to help with the writing, but we'd have to get like a good like writer's room.
That might be
Brenton,
fun.
Do you want to share your social media links and everything like that?
Absolutely. So I am at Brenton Lengel, Brenton, Lengel, Lengel, all one word, on Twitter. There's also my comic, Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, which has been nominated for 2 Ringo Awards, which I'm really excited about. The Twitter for that is at Snow White Bones. I am Brenton Lengel on YouTube. Just search that, and you can also find me at www.brentonlengel.com, and you can find me on Facebook again, Brenton Lengel or Brent Lengel. I'm literally the only Brenton Lengel in the world, so you should have an easy.
Well,
time
there you go. You got the brand sealed.
Yeah.
As I just asked the Twitch chat, if anybody has any is there somebody we could rate on Twitch? I'm not seeing anybody streaming right now on Twitch, but I would like to donate the audience to somebody because there's 35 people watching right now. So if there's a good Twitch channel we could rate into, please let me know. Wait, what? Johnny 5? Yeah. Is this a quote from the Johnny 5 movie, or is there a streamer called Johnny 5? Amy EC3. Okay.
Yeah, there might be somebody I could shout out, actually.
Oh, who is that?
So a guy by the name of Bobby or Mustache Bob, he just started a channel called Mustache Mafia on YouTube. He's freaking brilliant, and we've done a number of streams together. He's a American combat vet who's like all about like actual like postmodernism. Like he knows all the shit about Foucault and all that shit.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a really, really smart guy. And he's putting out his podcast now on YouTube. He's got like 10 subscribers. It would be awesome if everybody could go and check out his podcast and subscribe. In fact, let me get the link for you guys.
Let's get in touch because I just started a channel called The Slopstash at youtube.com/slopstash. And it's like a collectivist comedy call-in cooking show. And maybe we could do a little stash crossover.
That sounds. I love a stash crossover. Hang on, let me go to my channel here. By the way, somebody in your chat was complimenting me because I did a poetry reading of Khalil Gibran, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of Gibran. I have a copy of the Prophet, and it's one of my favorite poets of all time. But yeah, let me get. Where do I have Bobby linked here?
I will also step in and plug the NonCompete highlights channel, where we will be releasing highlights from this stream, from the debate, and from lots of other live streams and interviews that we do. It's a really great channel, I think, and I hope you'll subscribe if you're not already subscribed.
Yeah, here I'm sending you the link, and if you want to put that out in the regular chat, he's literally got 6 subscribers. So
we'll have to work on that
because he just opened it. But yeah, the dude's brilliant.
Folks,
yeah,
this is the right time. We got COVID. A lot of us are trying not to leave our homes. This is a good time to consume media. So check these links out that I'm dropping in the chats. Subscribe, etc.
Yeah. If you want to hear from someone who actually understands the Frankfurt School, go to this YouTube channel.
I've heard a podcast about it, and that's about it. But well, listen, Brenton, this is really great, and I hope we can collaborate more in the future. It might be a while before I have the emotional capacity to do another debate, but let me know if an opportunity comes up, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely.
And,
I
really enjoyed this experience.
Yeah, you keep doing what you're doing. I have been a big fan ever since I saw the video that you did on, like you'd been on my radar, and then I saw the video you did on the PewDiePie pipeline, and I was like, okay, yeah, this guy is a guy that I'm very interested in following.
That was the one that kind of put us on the map. Oh, by the way, everybody, I've completely neglected well, you never sell yourself. And this is why I always have to sell Luna stuff. YouTube.com/Luna Oi. O-I. Everyone needs to say, like, this is an amazing channel because it's a Vietnamese person sharing her unique, authentic experience, sharing things about aspects of Vietnam you don't know about. And it's really fascinating stuff. I think everybody needs to check it out. YouTube.com/Luna Oi. So check that out as well. And I guess that is it for now. We'll have another stream Sunday night at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern U.S. time. That's our broadcast. Brenton, thank you so much for joining us once again. I'm going to raid now into this Amy C3 on Twitch. So if you're on Twitch, just hang back. This was recommended to us by our audience. I have no idea what they're streaming about or what they do, but maybe we will enjoy it and let them know that we sent you. And please stay safe out there.
Bye-bye.
Solidarity. And if you're an ANCAP, please reassess the decisions I did. And I'm so much happier ever since I dropped the ANCAP
bullshit
anchor that was just weighing me down, the albatross around my neck. So anyway, thank you for watching us in all sincerity. Be safe, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Solidarity. I'll catch you all later.
Solidarity forever. Bye-bye.
So hungry.
We're still live on YouTube. I don't know.